I see straight up 1 o'clock. So I would say let's go ahead and get started because I have far too many slides for the time allotment. So we will go ahead and start once I get everything arranged here. Sorry. I did finally figure out how to actually upgrade Keynote. So I have the fancy features that Cort had yesterday. And like I think most other people, I won't be able to really see the Zoom chat. I won't really be able to see that in real time, but feel free to unmute and just interrupt me. We will be moving super fast because we've got 1 hour and I'll probably have too many slides for a 1 hour presentation. So we'll probably be skipping a little bit of stuff. If you find something of interest or you see something of interest and you'd like me to slow down and go back, just unmute and holler. If it's something you'd like to follow up with later, the slides will be available. You can kind of look through. I tried to put a lot of information on the slides. So if it piques your interest and you're like, oh, I want to dig into that a little deeper, just reach out to us and we can pick up the thread and go from there. So just making sure that everyone can kind of see this slide. And if I advance it, you do see my advanced slides. Okay, I see at least one person saying thumbs up. So we'll go ahead and get started here. This is the agenda for this for the next hour of your lives. You're going to get to hear a little bit about our technical services. You get to see and hear a little bit about some reports about our major projects that are currently either in progress or stuff that we've completed over the last year. We'll do a quick traffic summary and kind of look at all of the different ways that we look at traffic throughout the network and the systems we use. We'll talk a little bit about some future plans and projects, and then I'll do my best to leave a little bit of time, at least at the end of the meeting, for questions and answers and accusations and hollering and screaming if that's what you choose to do. So let's get started. Again, I'd like to quickly go over the primary technical services that KanREN offers to our membership. The first one is always technical support, and especially for connected members. Most of our public-facing tool set is available at snap.kanren.net, and that's snapp.kanren.net. From there, you can get to public-facing graphs that show 10-second and 5-minute views of traffic on all kinds of interfaces across the network. You can also jump in and look at the software calls itself a router proxy. If you're more familiar with the term looking glass, that's the term that's probably more often used. Allows you to run commands in a web interface, run commands against our core routers. You can do all kinds of stuff in there. Obviously you can do things like ping and trace route and route lookups, but beyond that, you can also do, really specific stuff like a show interface, diagnostic optics, and see like what is our transmit optic level, what's our receive optic level. So if we're troubleshooting something and trying to figure out polarity of a cable or something, the router proxy can actually give you some self-service capabilities there for all of our core routers. There's also a bunch of weather maps that we've created. Weather maps pull data from the same backend database as Snap. So Snap populates it, and then the weather maps can visually present that data in a maybe easier to digest format that's just easier for humans to kind of read through. And we have several weather maps for different parts of the network, or just the core, or just their direct internet attachments and all those different things. So feel free to peruse those things. The one caveat I would always put on our weather maps is it's 100% manually curated. So if you find a problem, number one, don't be too shocked, because it just means someone forgot to update a link. If you find a problem, please let us know and we will do our best to get it fixed ASAP. Also on that landing page, you'll find links off to KanREN's Perf Sonar, Mad Dash, as well as Internet2's Mad Dash, and ESNet's Mad Dash. So Mad Dash is a piece of software that allows us to present Perf Sonar mesh test results in a really quickly digestible format. So it gives you a really quick, these are the mesh nodes. this is their status, green, amber, red type of, is it working? Is there maybe a problem, or is there a huge problem type of, stoplight style type of thing. It can be really helpful to look through there and see, like, does the KanREN network, is it functioning? Is it moving data properly? Is there any loss? Is there out of order delivery? Is there like a weird jitter profile? Personar can shed light across our core network for all that type of stuff. And of course, because Internet 2 and ESNet both run those run meshes, we can use Personar to segment and show any part of the entire RNE landscape throughout the entire country, which is pretty cool. There's also a link, I believe it's towards the very top of the page, to join the KanREN members Slack team, where you can get kind of real-time communication with KanREN staff. And that can be handy if we're trying to throw back a lot of stuff in real time. Or if you just don't like talking on the phone, Slack is a nice option as well. There's always the email to the ticketing system. So just support@kanren.net will open a ticket for you. That's a great place to start any type of support request for any existing services. Always remember, if you're looking for new service, you're going to want to hit up info@kanren.net. But for existing
Brad,
stuffs, yep.
This is Sister D. Would you all rather us do support at KanREN when we're asking a question, or is it really just fine to go ahead and use the Slack with the KanREN staff? Because I've done that a couple times and I don't know really if that's the way you all want us to do it.
We're honestly good either way. If it's something that's going to go into a ticket, our guys can copy that stuff into a ticket. That way it all gets populated and the knowledge base gets built that way, and we can do kind of long-term, long horizon support through the ticket system. But you're welcome to use either method to start a request. If it's a particularly complicated thing that we know is going to take quite a lot of time, it'll probably end up in the ticket system. But if you want to start the kind of triage via Slack, that's perfectly fine too. However you are most comfortable is the way we want you to do it, for sure.
Great, thank you.
And then there's always these old school phones, I think is what they're called. And our number hasn't changed. It's still 785-865-9820. And Burt Reynolds will answer your call, or maybe it's Jeff, I don't know. Okay, so when it comes to actual services beyond just technical support, the big 800-pound gorilla for KanREN is obviously network connectivity. When we talk about that, most people think, oh, we're talking about big I internet service, downloading the Facebook and I don't know, uploading cat pictures or whatever people do on the internet these days. And that would mean, kind of full transit. That means research connections. That means private peering and caching. But network connectivity also, for a lot of organizations, means layer 2 and layer 3 MPLS services. But it also means DWDM-based dedicated bandwidth. And it also means Cloud Connect kind of private connections into the big 3 infrastructure as a service platforms. And for some members, it also means, QoS aware SIP trunks out to, a big SIP provider that we partner with. And for some members, it also means some dedicated ports and IPs for lack of a better term, kind of side channel connections for things like out of band networks, so that you can access your stuff even if your network is completely offline, or things like security scanners. And what I want to try and drive home here is KanREN's network connectivity is not about just getting to the Facebook. We're really about getting you capacity into the network. And once you have that capacity, enabling all of these capabilities and other capabilities that may come down the road, and doing our best to, whenever those capabilities become available, trying to offer them at no additional cost. So once you have your capacity into the KanREN core network, whether that's a 1 gig tail circuit or dual 100 gig feeds into your university campus, we want to help you carve that up and use it in the most efficient way to meet you guys' needs. And we're going to try to do it at no additional cost whenever possible. Another technical service that we do offer to members is a managed on-premise firewall service. This is primarily offered out to medium to smaller members who just don't want to have to deal with their firewalls anymore, that don't want to have to deal with the hardware replacement cycles, that don't want to have to deal with all the junk that comes with it. You can push all that responsibility off to KanREN. We will place a physical box at your site. Currently, we're using Fortinet, FortiGate hardware, and we use a centralized management system, a centralized logging system. Members have the ability to watch logs in real time via FortiAnalyzer is the product name. And then really the killer features for me are that I think most members would benefit from is you push management off to KanREN, so you're not responsible for having to make the changes and stage them up and everything. But beyond that, there's kind of some hidden features that I think are in there. That is, KanREN maintains warm shelf spares so that if a device in the field breaks, we have a shelf spare to put into place if needed. The other thing is, as part of the cost of the service, we have scheduled hardware replacement included in the service charge. So we're not going to let those boxes become 10 years old and on the very edge of physical death before they get replaced. We're going to be replacing them and keeping them up to date with reasonably new hardware at all times. And you don't have to come up with the $5,000 or $6,000 every 3 years to do that. That's all just built into the service offering. We're going to gloss very much over ETP because it's a huge service offering. I'm mainly going to focus on, so Akamai offers this product called Enterprise Threat Protector, otherwise known as ETP for short. In its no-cost version through KanREN, it is a DNS-based solution for blocking access to known security threats, and that's malware, botnet, command and control, and phishing. It can also do a small amount of like AUP, content filtering type stuff, but it's really built as a security system using DNS resolution as the ability to enforce that policy. There are several upgrade options. I think there's a total of 6 different tiers of ETP service that can go all the way from a simple no-cost DNS filter for known security problems, all the way up to a cloud firewall that your users anywhere in the world can use to secure their traffic. So if any of that type of stuff interests you, please let us know. We can talk you through the options, talk you through where there's costs involved, if there are, and give you an idea on timetables. We can also, for most stuff, we can give you really quick demos and demo accounts at no cost. So you can kind of kick the tires on something and not have a high pressure salesman that's going to call you every 3 months asking where the contract is. KanREN offers no cost vulnerability scanning using the Nessus vulnerability scanner from Tenable. Just to kind of summarize what we offer, it's basically we will use our Nessus install to scan your network and identify hosts and ports and services that are sitting open to the world. And Nessus will then try to do its best to fingerprint the service and identify version numbers and things like this and compare all that data to known security vulnerabilities that would be impacted by that service version. What's really nice if KanREN does this for you is a couple things. We don't really have a limit on the number of IPs that we're going to scan for you, whereas almost any commercial provider is going to charge you a ton more for every IP you want scanned. We're happy to keep scanning about as much as you want us to, as long as it's yours. As long as it's yours. Yeah, we won't scan your neighbors that you don't like. And then once the scan is completed, our staff actually grab the results off of the Nessus scanner and go through it and look for the things that you really need to pay attention to. So if you're not used to reading this type of output and dealing with these types of systems, our staff can kind of give you some pointers on these are the two things in this report you really need to pay attention to and get somebody working on like today. The rest of this stuff you just need to look at some point. There is one huge caveat to our scanning with Nessus. The system will allow us, it is capable of doing a credential-based scan, but KanREN absolutely will not take your credentials to do that. If you want all that stuff done, there's some commercial vendors that are happy to do it. But KanREN, unfortunately, is not in a position to take your credentials and guarantee their safety and all that stuff. It's just not what we do. So that's the one caveat on our Nessus vulnerability scans. DDoS scrubbing is offered to all KanREN connected members. So if you have a connection into the KanREN network, we have DDoS scrubbing enabled for your connection, regardless of its size. The service is operated in the cloud by a huge DDoS scrubbing provider called Radware. I would say they're either 1A or 1B in the scrubbing world with Arbor Networks. The way that the service is kind of contractually built out is they operate it. Internet2 spent a lot of time and worked really hard to get an attractive contract environment for RNE networks like KanREN. And then GPN purchases a portion of that capacity and capability for this region, and KanREN then participates in the GPN purchase. That's kind of the contractual build out, but from a data standpoint, from bits on the wire standpoint, Radware runs the service and the clean traffic is delivered across the Internet2 network back to KanREN. So the way it works though is when a host is getting attacked on the KanREN network or one of its members, we generate a more specific route. Radware leaks that route out to the internet. The internet goes, oh, hey, there's this new way that's way more specific to get to that attack, to that host. And they send all the traffic to Radware. Radware's black magic boxes in, I think, about 2 seconds is what we've been testing. Is they start throwing all the junk traffic on the ground and just sending us the good stuff. And we monitor the attack in the Radware portal. After it has subsided, we remove that more specific route and traffic returns back to normal and everything is back to normal operating. We can preemptively activate traffic diversion if we need to, if there's some potential elevated risk situation. So DDoS scrubbing is built in for all KanREN connected members at all scales. So it doesn't matter if you're on 100 meg tail circuit or 100 gig campus drop port. If you're KanREN connected, this is included in what you already get from us. We do some security monitoring. Some of this stuff, these are all external systems that help us identify potential security threats within the network. And potentially hacked machines and things that just need more attention. So we currently use Shadow Server and Shodan as repositories that send us some data about, hey, we saw something very strange from this host on your network. We think it might be susceptible to this, announcement of a security threat. This is what we know about it. This is how you should probably take a look and fix it. When we get those reports, we then have the ability to reach out to the member and let them know, and then ask if they need any help with triaging that problem and kind of, do you feel comfortable handling it yourself or do you need any help, basically. Very soon we'll be adding in a service with Team KanREN using their Nimbus threat monitoring system. Nimbus Threat Monitor is what it's called. And it's a system where they ingest our flow data, then they apply their security intelligence databases and IP reputation to our flow data and elevate the stuff that's like, hey, you've got something talking to a command and control server in Germany that's part of this botnet. I think you need to take a look at this. There's something wrong here. And that type of alert can actually happen in near real time because they're looking at live flow data flowing into their system immediately coming out of our network. And the main thing is here, like when you couple that with our DDoS scrubbing, it's evidence that KanREN is really trying as hard as we can to provide a secure connection without putting a lot of boxes physically in line on the network. We're doing our best to provide a secure connection with a lot of extra metadata to the side to help alert us to problems as what we can realistically do today. So we do offer a small amount of VM hosting to members. If you need to put something in the cloud, but you're not comfortable throwing it into all the way out into AWS, we might be a possibility to host it for you. We do have some limits that are just realities because VM hosting is not our primary wheelhouse. We haven't dumped a huge investment into being able to host machines. So it's one of those things where if you need to host a VM, reach out to us and just let us know what you need, and we can tell you whether we can meet that need or whether we're not a good fit for you. And we'll be pretty honest right out front with you. If we're not going to be able to do it, we'll let you know. We also have some convenience services, and probably the big one there is we will happily host DNS zones for you at no additional cost. So whether that means we slave your zones from your servers, or whether that means we are the primary and you use our GUI management system, we're happy to do any type of scenario. Just let us know if you're interested in having a backup of your zones or having us completely handle your zones. You know, whatever you want to do, we're happy to kind of bend over backwards in that regard. We also do a very small amount of web hosting that's primarily built for like disaster scenarios, where just kind of a placeholder web page that says, hey, we're offline right now. You know, surprise, we're down. So if you're trying to get to us, we know something's broken. So let's talk a little bit about some major projects that are either currently still ongoing or stuff that we completed throughout the year. And the big one is our fiber network between Kansas City and Wichita. For those that aren't aware, we have this new fiber that we leased that's going to connect the kind of the far east side of the existing fiber network terminates at 1100 Walnut. This new network will bridge 1100 Walnut to 1102 Grand, and then connect Grand over to Johnson County Community College, Johnson County Community College, Emporia State, and then Emporia State down to Wichita State. Throughout the year, we selected Equinox as our hardware vendor to light that fiber with DWDM equipment. And we worked with them to plan a pretty typical kind of 40-channel EDFA-based 100 gigahertz grid type of DWDM system. We did keep it fairly simple because there's no bisecting fibers anywhere. We don't really need ROADMs at this point. It doesn't buy us a lot to be able to put ROADMs in the network today. So we tried to keep it really simple, which also helped us keep costs down as well, which is always a good deal. We ordered the gear and it did arrive on February 24th. And then during the inventory process, discovered a little issue with the design, and we got to order 4 more filters. Fortunately, these were not cost prohibitive and were not deal breakers. And we did fortunately receive all 4 of those filter shelves just in time for us to physically deploy all of this equipment at its final resting place in all of these locations in early April. And we did the physical deployment early so that when the service turn-up team with Equinox is physically here in the state, trying to get all the services up and working, they don't have to get out their screwdrivers and have to, bolt stuff into racks. All that part's done. And we are hoping to have the Equinox team here on the ground doing those service installs on the week of May 17th is the hope. And this is this is our family photos, our scrapbook page here. This is all the gear as it sits in when I unpacked it from the boxes to do inventory. This is all on the far left. This is what it looked like when it was all in a set of racks right next to each other. And then the other pictures are after we did the physical deployments, before we've done service turn up and before we've even powered the equipment on. This is what it looks like currently at rest, where it's going to live permanently. And for anyone that's super observant, you're going to notice there's a picture missing. Emporia State has 2 nodes that are in 2 different locations. And in my infinite wisdom, I forgot to take a picture of the second one. We will definitely get real pictures of all of them when we do the actual service turnups. I was just moving too quick at the second location and completely forgot to take a picture. So when we actually send out the blog post or the write-up of everything when it's done, we will actually have pictures of all of them at that time. We won't forget one of the children. This is what the fiber path looks like, just in a map type view, a Google Earth view, I guess. It's a total of it's just right at 500 kilometers of fiber from end to end. And it obviously connects, downtown Kansas City, 1102 Grand to Johnson County, to a mid-span amplifier, to Emporia State, to another mid-span amplifier, and then down to Wichita State ultimately. This is definitely going to be a little bit of an eye chart. I couldn't come up with a better way to convey how the waves are going to be built out on the optical network. So this is the best thing I could come up with to explain it, because it's a little bit of a complex situation and it's hard to kind of draw out. But we will build out a total of 1.4 terabit of capacity on day 1 with actual deployed waves, not in terms of capabilities with more, like that's what we will actually have in terms of light on the fiber on day 1. So if you work from the WSU side, the far left, we'll have a 200 gig channel that stretches from WSU all the way into downtown Kansas City at 1102 Grand. And we'll have a couple 100 gig ports that we can use for traffic. Then we have another 200 gig channel that runs from WSU over to Emporia State's Creamer Hall. We have another 200 gig channel that runs from WSU to Johnson County OCB. Then we have a 200 gig channel that runs from Emporia State Plum Hall into downtown Kansas City. Another 200 gig channel that runs from Johnson County Community College's Rainier Center into downtown Kansas City. And then we will have at least a 400 gig wave between 1102 Grand and 1100 Walnut. I'm hoping we might be able to sneak it up to a 600 gig wave if the fiber works with us and is flexible. Now, some of these services will be ultimately built out at 10 gig, and I'll show you here, I think it's the next slide where we'll talk about how the 10 gig stuff gets built out. Yeah, here we go. So from a line side standpoint, the DWDM network, it's really straightforward EDFA amplifiers. This is not, we're not breaking any new ground in the amplifier side of the fence. These are not Raman. There's no ROPA technology in the line. This is all super straightforward EDFA amps from the line side. And again, we didn't use any ROTAM stuff, so there's not a lot of complexity with switching waves between all these different channels. So what it really comes down to is service cards. And we're really going to be using 2 service cards to produce all this bandwidth and provision this bandwidth out. The 2 of them are the 400 FRS04 and the 10 gig EMUX. The really big workhorse is that 400 FRS04. It's the bandwidth pump. It's the thing that's actually generating all the capacity into the fiber end to end. And then it drops out 1, 2, 3, or 400 gigabit of service to the client side out the front of the card. And what's really cool about that card is that the FR part of the model name is for flex rate. The really cool thing about this card is we have the ability to change things like modulation technique, FEC overhead, baud rate. Those are the three main things you can change in order to meet the demand of the bandwidth that you want to produce and the reality of the fiber that you have, right? So in the optical world, when you're working with distances this long, you always have like an OSNR target, an optical signal to noise ratio target that you need to try and hit. Otherwise, the service is really not going to work. And just the two extreme examples for this card are, you want to get 400 gigabit, you're going to have to be in 16 QAM, which is pretty advanced modulation in the optical world these days. And you can get that signal to go 1,000 kilometers, but you have an OSNR target of 29 dB. So that's a pretty clean signal, right? You can't have a lot of problems with your fiber there. But because it's a flex rate card, if you have those types of problems, you can always change something like lower your modulation, change your FEC a little bit, or maybe change your baud rate. And maybe you don't get 400 gig, maybe then you only get 300 gig, but you still get a tremendous amount of bandwidth, and you can meet the realities of your fiber network, the underlying physical fiber, and still produce huge amounts of bandwidth. And the way that we'll handle 10 gig services, at least on day one, is with this 10 gig eMux card. And the way that it works is, and I kind of drew in this red line in between the eMux, sorry, I should have said, the top card is, in the diagram here, is the 400 gig card, the big, really big workhorse card. The bottom card is the eMux card that'll take a 100 gig signal and break it out into 10 gig ports. The nice thing about that is whenever we are ready to transition those downlink connections from 10 gig to 100 gig, all we have to do is pull the eMux card out and replace it on that 400 gig card with a QSFP28, 100 gig optic, and plug it into the router or plug it into the switch or whatever we're plugging into, and the upgrade's done, right? So we're talking a total of about $1,000 or so for the optics, and we've just upgraded from a bunch of 10 gig drops to 100 gig drop, just like that. And some people may hear that and think, oh, well, you're wasting a bunch of money on these eMux cards, but those eMux cards are about $5,000 a piece, roughly. And it is by far the cheapest way I could find to provide 10 gig services to the local location. Anything else would likely require like a subtending switch from Juniper or Cisco or somebody like that. And their $5,000 switches don't typically have 100 gig uplinks. And some of you may be thinking, well, why don't you just lay in a 10 gig wave or a couple 10 gig waves? In the world of DWDM, I don't want to get too deep in the technical side of this stuff, but you really do not want to mix like coherent 100 gig and above with 10 gig services and below. It's really hard to keep it all in balance and keep everything working properly. Eventually, you'll have to massage something into place and you'll lose waves that are the other type. So that's obviously not a good situation. And I felt this is the most cost-effective way for us to still have, an easy upgrade path that is future-proof's a terrible word or phrase, but it is closer to future-proof, and it's the least expensive way to still have 10 gig dropouts to the locations where we're deploying these eMux cards. I will probably stop for just a second. Are there any questions about the DWDM project from Kansas City to Wichita? Nobody. Okay. We will keep moving then. The next project I want to talk a little bit about was we laid in a new 100 gig connection into GPN and Internet 2 via Tulsa. We did it with a 100 gig lease circuit from Lumen, or in case you don't know who that is, it's the artist formerly known as CenturyLink. And we laid that circuit in between KanREN's core router at Wichita State University and the GPN OneNet equipment that lives in Tulsa. We do share that capacity with other GPN members, so it's not just for KanREN. The GPN traffic rides KanREN's MPLS network as an L2 circuit between, effectively from their stance, it rides from Tulsa to Kansas City across KanREN's MPLS network. We completed that guy on August 9th, 2020. And we created redundant peerings for KanREN into the RNE and the I2PX tables on October 25th. And we worked with members who were using Cloud Connect and got the last of everybody fully geographically diverse deployments done on February 25th of 2021. So I feel very comfortable now saying that all of our Internet 2 services and all of our members who have Cloud Connect services are fully redundant between Kansas City and Tulsa. There's a tremendous amount of geographical redundancy now, and it would take a lot of cascading failures now to take Internet 2 services completely offline, which is a really nice situation, because we used to be in a situation where one problem in one facility in downtown Kansas City, Missouri, and everything's dead. Now we have full reroute capability for everything. It's a little bit of an eye chart, and if you want to see a better, a bigger version of this, please let me know. But what we're just basically trying to show here is the way things were before, where everything's dependent on a single link, a single router on KanREN side, single router on Internet 2 side, lots of single points of failure. Everything now can completely reroute through Tulsa, which for us goes through Wichita, and all those services are completely redundant down there. So it takes now multiple failures to actually take services offline. The next project I wanted to talk a little bit about was those of you who are using KanREN's managed firewall service. True to our word, we are going to be doing a firewall forklift replacement this summer. I won't go into too much detail off this slide. We're pretty much looking at using the 40-gate 200F hardware. Has a lot of room to grow for all of our members, so I feel pretty comfortable rolling this out to all of our members who use that service. The hope would be that we can obviously get at least 4 years, and I feel like we might even be able to get 5 years out of this hardware, which is really nice place to be for that service. And we're targeting a kind of roughly post July 1st rollout, so that we can avoid some licensing renewal messes that always come up if you roll it out before July 1st. Then you have hidden costs in the renewal process. Oh yeah, here I have a bunch of slides about route validation, and I'm going to skip over a lot of them, to be quite honest with you. If route validation is something that's interesting to you, please contact me, because I would love to talk to you for 2 hours, and you'll be ready to hang up the phone on me. But I would love to talk to you about it. The folks that really need to be paying attention to it are anyone who is a resource holder. So if you have IP space that was assigned to you directly by Aaron, or if you have IP space that was assigned to you before Aaron, so a legacy resource is what it's called, you definitely need to start paying attention to some of this stuff. If you are using KanREN's IP space, you're already covered. We built ROAs for you 4 years ago, so you're covered by what we've already done. What I want to talk a little bit about, though, is the other side of route validation, which is the side that only KanREN has to do, because we're a network operator in the default free zone. KanREN needs to eventually stand up some validation software systems and feed validation databases into our routers so that we can determine what's good, what's bad, throw the bad on the ground, and only follow paths that are actually good. We had done that. We had actually stood up the RIPE NCC validation software, had played around with it in the lab, felt pretty comfortable rolling out, found a problem with it, confirmed that other people in the community were also having problems. And while we were troubleshooting what to do, RIPE announced that they were going to stop development on that software and everyone should start using something else. So I made the executive decision in the group to be like, okay, I think the small charity in Kansas is going to wait until the international community figures out best common practice on this one. And it seems like over the last year, that's kind of what's happened. And the international community's kind of decided that the Routinator software and Octo RPKI are probably the right way to go. And most folks seem to be deploying one of each and then feeding them both into your routers. So the hope is that sometime later this summer, we will be able to start doing validation using those softwares and discarding any invalid routes that we learn from our peers. And again, that is definitely one of those subjects. If any of that piques your interest, please let me know and be prepared for a long conversation is the only warning I will give you ahead of time. We did some peering upgrades and some cache changes throughout the year. In May, we did an upgrade for Apogee from 1 gig to 10 gig just to handle more bandwidth. In June, we added a peer with Midco over at 1102 Grand, which really helped a lot of residential folks because their traffic was bumping, I think, through Chicago before it came back to us. And so this cut tremendous amounts of time out of the path for Midco customers. We did upgrade peering at the Kansas City Peering Exchange from 10 gig to 100 gig. And because KCIX is good people, they just gave us the 100 gig port for free, which is not common. Usually on internet exchanges or peering exchanges, ports cost a lot of money, like for 100 gig, could be in the $5,000+ per month. And we just got one for free because they're really nice and they like us. So it pays to be nice to people, I guess, because that's pretty much what happened. Unfortunately, we had some cache turndowns in June. In June and July, Google and Akamai hardware was reaching the end of its life. They were going to have to replace that hardware. Traffic volumes had kind of bottomed out due to COVID, and they were like, we're going to decommission the caches after everything goes back to normal. If you have traffic volume that needs it, let us know and we'll do another deployment. We're not trying to take them away. It's just the hardware has to get replaced and traffic volume just isn't there. However, at roughly the same time, Akamai, for their side at least, they had done a significant build out in Kansas City and they are connected to KCIX at 100 gigabit, just like us. So I feel like we actually probably have better connectivity to Akamai's environment than we did when we actually hosted their caches on net, because the environment they built in Kansas City is way bigger than what they have with us. And it's actually, their people maintain it all the time. It can serve out more traffic because it's under their control. So yeah, in every way, I think it's probably a better situation for us. I will buzz through this one super fast. So KanREN uses a cloud flow reporting tool that we're going to actually see a couple outputs from called Kintech. They have a new product called Synthetics. The gist of it is you can deploy a lightweight agent on a host on your network and then have that agent test out to like the public clouds like AWS in Ashburn, AWS in Dallas, on down the line, with all of the major clouds that exist, even beyond just the big three. KanREN did that. We've stood up some tests with the most common of the big networks, the big IaaS platforms. And it provides us another data point. If anybody's ever reporting problems with like, AWS and Ashburn, we actually have a test that goes all the way into AWS and Ashburn from the local network and can kind of give us an idea of what's going on. These may be eye charts. I apologize, trying to fit it all on a single slide. There's kind of a heads up test results page. If you click on one of the tests, it'll lead you into this screen that's on the right. And then it'll give you a timeline up there at the top that's kind of presented as green with little blocks of time that indicate, oh, during this segment, there was a little bit, something was not quite right. When you highlight over it, it indicates, oh, there was a little bit of a weird jitter. What's really cool is from here, we can immediately pivot over into the flow reporting side of the house and see, because it's all the exact same portal, and identify like, was that congestion? Was that some other event somewhere in the path that would indicate what that problem actually was? Or do we come to the conclusion this was something in the ether between us and AWS? Okay, getting down to not a ton of time, so I'm going to start going even faster. Quick traffic summary. Over the past, quick caveat, actually, before we get started. We have several systems that can produce traffic graphs for us. One of them is Libre NMS, one of them is Snap, and another one is that Kintex system for flow reporting. We're about to see graphs from all of them. They're all going to look a little bit different. That's not me trying to pull the wool over someone's eyes. It's just because that system happens to produce the graph the best for this particular scenario. So the first one here comes out of Libre, and it's a combo stacked graph of all of our core interfaces together, showing kind of how much data is flowing around the core of the network at any given time. And the main reason I like to keep a really close eye on this is we need to really keep our biggest core link today is 100 gigabit. We have pretty well architected the network to handle any single failure of any connection. But if this traffic volume reaches maybe 125 gigabit or so, we really need to start understanding what happens if there's two failures. Where does all this traffic start to fail over to? What would the volumes be? Some of those things. And this graph helps me keep an eye on just how close we're getting to that kind of tipping point of where we need to start planning these multiple failure scenarios out. These are our DIA, which is direct internet attachment connections. So this is what most people would call big I internet full transit connections. We have 4 of them that are 10 gig apiece for a total of 40 gigabit of capacity. We're only using about 4 gigabit, so 1/10 of that. And again, we just keep an eye on this to make sure we're never getting particularly close to our physical port or our subscription capacity on those. And we're very healthy. We have nothing to be worried about here. Switching over to graphs that come out of Snap. Had to use Snap on this one, unfortunately, because I wanted to see the I2PX traffic, and Libre deleted my old graph on me before I grabbed data off of it when we moved some interfaces around. But so I2PX is obviously a service from Internet 2. It's how we would get typically from to like Google services are almost always going to come over I2PX and stuff like that, like stuff that's connected to I2PX that is really big providers is going to come across Internet 2 and use this connection, but it would normally be considered internet service. And we see pretty healthy peaks up around like the 20 gig range on I2PX. That is all traffic that if I2PX completely failed, we would need to pick up all that traffic on our DIA connections that were in this graph. So you add, we have a peak here of about 9 gig. We add another 20 gig to that. All of a sudden, we're at 30 gig of our total capacity. And that's assuming everything balances out equally across multiple networks. And spoiler alert, it's not going to balance equally. This is the reason why we always keep a little bit of extra DIA over what we actually need, is to absorb failure scenarios like that and not have to explain why all of your Facebook traffic is getting thrown away. This is a combination of our transit, and so these are the full transit. This is I2PX, this is RNE, the lateral peering and caching interfaces. Just trying to get an idea of all the upstream connections to the network, and if we stack them all together, what does it look like? The main thing is this bottom graph. If you look at it, it's about 20 gigabit of traffic, roughly. And you know, in a 1 month period across those interfaces, we move about 5 petabytes, maybe a little bit more, maybe 5.25, just depending on the month. And that's all great. That's all MPLS services, but I'm sorry, that's all IP services. So that's all somehow associated with, you know, what we would call internet service. But KanREN, like I said before, also has a lot of MPLS traffic floating around in the background. If you look here at this last month, we see these spikes and peaks hitting, like, you know, not too far from a 20 gig range. So we have 20 gig of, you know, big I internet type traffic, but we also have nearly 20 gig of just MPLS traffic that hides around in the background of the network. This is oftentimes a campus connection to a disaster recovery facility elsewhere on the network. That stuff is clearly, you know, dumping huge amounts of data across the network, across 10 gig interfaces typically. So none of this is a problem, but it's all something that KanREN has to plan for and deal with these types of spikes and the unpredictability of them. And a pretty healthy amount of, you know, 3 petabytes moved across the MPLS network in a single month is non-trivial for sure. The other thing that's kind of interesting is during the period of COVID, we didn't see a dramatic lowering of data movement across the MPLS network. It pretty much stayed the same for the most part. And then I wanted to include this because sometimes it's a little hard to explain what's different about research networking. And sometimes you find a graph that just kind of explains it for you. And this graph, especially the top one that says last month, it does that for you. This is our connection between us and GPN, which obviously ultimately leads off into Internet 2. The spikes on this graph are tens of gigabits. So, you know, we have a baseline that looks like somewhere around 10 gig, and we have these spikes that are somewhere around 30 to 35 gig, depending upon the day. That is a pretty good definition of what it is to be a research network. Is, you know, residential networks generally don't have to deal with this kind of stuff. This is a problem for research networks. Now, I'm not saying that this is a harder problem to solve than what they do. I'm just saying it is a unique problem. And trying to plan and cope with tens of gigabits shift in traffic and a bit cannon all of a sudden starting up and throwing 40 extra gigabit of traffic on the wire is not the easiest thing in the world to do, especially when you're a charity trying to make sure you're also not wasting money. Now I'm going to flip over and show a couple things that came out of our flow reporting system. Again, things are going to look a little different. Numbers might be a little bit different. I'm not trying to pull the wool over your eyes, but this is sample data as opposed to like SNMP graphs of an interface. So it's just a little bit different beast. And this obviously will only be IP domain traffic. This will not include any MPLS or DWDM traffic. Yeah, we move 25 gig of IP traffic across the network, and looks like we maximize around about 3.5 million packets per second in any given moment. And keep in mind, that also does not include any of the core interfaces. That's just the edges of the network combined. If we included all the core interfaces, all of those numbers would go through the roof. This is actually the exact same data set. It's just, I just told it, show me the same data, just organize it and show me the source autonomous system number of all that traffic. KanREN's listed on top because the Netflix cache is on a KanREN IP. We have a couple research connections that are pretty good size that use KanREN IPs. And then any KanREN member that uses KanREN IP space would also show up under our autonomous system number in this system. So that's why we're towards the top, even though we're not the biggest content provider to the world. And I love Sankey diagrams. They're maybe one of my favorite things. This is one where we are just looking again, it's actually the exact same data set. Just what we're looking at here is from left to right. What protocol was the data? What was the source city? What interface did it enter the network? What was the source autonomous system number? What was the destination autonomous system number? What was the destination city? For anybody that's ever dealt with Sankey diagrams, they're a lot more fun when they're live. And I would extend an invitation to anybody watching live or afterwards. If you would like to see this type of information for your organization, please let us know and we could get on a Zoom session, share screens and play around with live data and show you all the kind of crazy flow information you want to see. And one of the things we could do with that is what I did here. I told it, I only want you to filter out and show me ports that are associated with traditionally research applications and known research type stuff. And then also limit your data to only flows that were traversing known research interfaces like Internet 2's RNE network and GPN's RNE network. And then we draw it out and we kind of get an idea of where that traffic sourced from and where it went to and all those types of things. So it can be fun. It can shed a lot of light on how data is moving around and help us plan where capacity might be needed or who might be doing fun projects with other groups. I know I'm getting super short on time, so I'm going to talk real quick about some future plans and projects. So 400 gigabit, it is a thing. Internet 2 even has some proof that it even works. And it is, like Rick Moranis says, it is ludicrous speed for sure. It's kind of this insane concept of everyone's moving to 400 gigabit. I probably wasn't supposed to, but I went ahead and took some pictures of their equipment while I was in the Colo in Kansas City. So this is the Internet 2 facility in Kansas City. This is their brand new routers. This is their brand new optical equipment. And the density is kind of insane. These two Cisco routers on the right-hand side, each one of them has 24 400 gig ports and 12 100 gig ports, and they're 1 RU a piece. It's like, this is unfathomable. I can still remember when we were buying T1 muxes and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Like we could get a T1 mux and put it into a channelized DS3 and save all these ports on a Cisco 7206 VXR. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. This takes density to an insane level. It boggles my mind. So while 400 gigabit is a thing, there's also the reality of what KanREN needs out of a core route switch platform is not the easiest thing to find. You can kind of look through here and see all the stuff that we would need on day one. These are all pretty hard absolute requirements. The most difficult and expensive ones though are the route scale one. You know, that amount of fib is expensive. There's no other way around it. And HQoS is traditionally one of those really expensive features to have as well. Folks that make that type of hardware, they usually don't make it for charitable nonprofit RNE networks. They usually make it for massive multinational ISPs that have nearly endless pockets because they'll just raise your price at home an extra $5 a month and claim it was a rate change from the government or something. So it's always a challenge to find hardware to do this. And that leads me into saying we were originally planning on replacing our MX960 and 480 gear the summer of 2022. That's going to get pushed back to summer of 2023 in hopes that we will have a minimum of 2 vendors, and I hope 3, that will be able to provide us the equipment that we need at a reasonable price. There are some emergent options, I think, that will be available in that time frame. But if we were to go forward with the summer 22 time frame, I'm afraid we would only have a single option, and I don't like only having 1 vendor option in our price range. And I know that I've completely run out of time. I apologize. If we have enough time, the only one last thing. This is the last real slide. We're going to do a pilot project with mix mode. It's a software that allows us to send traffic into their system. It's a physically locally hosted system, so it's not leaving the network. It's physically on our network still. They then have software that applies some kind of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and looks for traffic patterns that are out of the baseline and that indicate a potential security problem that needs to be looked into. What KanREN's looking to do is, if it works in reality and it's cost effective, this would be something we hope to add to the network, similar to like the Team KanREN product and the other kind of watchdog products that we use as a way to help inform members of, hey, I think something's broken. I think you have a security problem that we need to collectively address. Don't know a whole lot yet because we're actually just getting started on this tomorrow. So we'll know more in a few weeks. And for those of you in the InTech, you'll probably get to hear far too much about it. You'll probably get bored of it, just like you did me talking about Kintech synthetics every month. And that is officially all my slides. I think I even covered most of the stuff on those slides I wanted to, other than the route origin stuff. Questions?
Before we move on, I want to say that we've got some lightning talks coming up later this afternoon. I've put a sign up form both in the chat and in Slack for that. They're 5 minutes, no slides, off the cuff. You know, talk about the bread you bake during the pandemic. The idea is to have a chance to give some people a chance to talk and get to know each other. So sign up for lightning talks. Or talk about new switch routers at 400 gig. Anything you want is cool.
Brad, I would like to commend you on the presentation. It's very easily to digest and at a level that we all can consume and understand it. Great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you guys have questions, anyone has questions, please let me know. You hit me up on Slack after you sign up. You can text me as long as it's not in the middle of the night. You can send a ticket into support, however you want to handle it. And sorry to Casey and James for going over.
I guess I'll go ahead and kick off. It looks like Casey's working on sharing his document, but after Cort asked me to talk, and actually asked to talk too, I guess, but I figured I couldn't talk specifically about what's happening in Kansas. I went to reach out to Casey and have him kind of do the local scenario, and then I'll jump in on the regional aspects of this. And so I'll just, in the interest of time, Casey, you want to get started?
Yeah, I apologize. I was fighting with Zoom there to unmute. Let me get my slideshow started again. and shared. All right, can you guys see those? All right, I see a thumbs up there. So we wanted to talk just a little bit about research here in Kansas and about around the region. Since a portion of my job now involves working directly with researchers and the cyber infrastructure teams at our universities to make sure that we at KanREN and our network specifically are doing everything we can to support you in that area. So on that note, we'll take a look at some successes and highlights for research and cyber and the cyber infrastructure that supports it. Starting with K-State, the staff at K-State has been able to upgrade as they've added over 10,000, no, they've upgraded to over 10,000 CPU cores with the addition of some new compute nodes in the last year based on EPYC CPUs. So that's a nice boost for researchers all around Kansas who use that cluster. Something that Kyle Hutton does that I think is really interesting is he keeps a live counter that they post on a public web page. What this does is based on all of the jobs run by researchers on Beocat, he calculates the CPU hours that were required to run those jobs. And then he uses cost calculators at Amazon AWS to compare what those would have cost Kansas researchers if they had been forced to run those jobs in the cloud. So you can see in the last 30 days, just having Beocat available to Kansas researchers those jobs would have cost almost $500,000 to run in the cloud. Really demonstrates the value that cluster and the KanShare program provide to the Kansas research community. And I just think that's fun to show. At the risk of stealing maybe part of a bullet point from James, something else that's gone on at K-State is that GP Argo, an NSF project over at GPN, has just purchased about $320,000 worth of new servers to be installed at K-State for an open science grid initiative. KSU had stopped serving up OSG jobs on Beocat after the 2016 fire forced them to move that cluster to another data center. So rejoining the open science grid is a great give back to the national and international community because now those national and international scientists can run open science grid jobs from K-State as well. The HPC staff at K-State has also been instrumental in allowing KanREN to help Wichita State University with their new HPC cluster. And that cluster is called Beoshock. So there's a brand new HPC cluster available to Kansas researchers through that same KanShare program. It's named Beoshock, and it's available through that KanShare program to all Kansas researchers for free with very few limitations. When WSU acquired that new cluster, they needed the skill set to install it, install the initial software, do regular maintenance, care, and feeding of the cluster. So through a collaborative agreement between the two universities and KanREN, Wichita State is able to pay via KanREN K-State for 1/2 of an FTE out of K-State's HPC support staff so that WSU doesn't have to develop that skill set locally. They get help desk services, remote administration of the system, and documentation services all very affordably. Since we're moving on to Wichita State, That Beowshot cluster is a Beowulf cluster, similar to Beocat. It has 2 large GPUs, or graphical processing units, and nearly 700 CPU cores. So a nice addition for researchers in Kansas. WSU began with their first users meeting on February 21st of 2020. And I got to attend that. There were about 63 attendees, but they now have at least 202 was the last user count I saw on the system. So they have expanded dramatically in just a year. And I understand, I saw him here yesterday. I don't know if he's here today, but I understand they've recently named Terrence Figge Director of User Engagement and Strategic Growth for that HPC system. So that system is growing, and the support structure around that system is growing. Moving on over to the University of Kansas, they have added in the last year about 1,720 cores to their primary cluster. They added 42 graphical processing units, or GPUs, and they added 3 new campus community owners. So these are departments that bought into the cluster and helped add that hardware. This brings their total cluster capacity to about 409 nodes, about 11,212 CPU cores, and about 115 GPUs. So a lot of good infrastructure out there for those that need high performance computing in Kansas. Another new boost for KU, they've also started a new initiative to establish a separate research identifiable data cluster for researchers like those at KU Med Center, who have data with a very different policies and restrictions on how and where their data sets can be stored, archived, and how they have to be transferred. So I know a lot of people will be excited about the ability to protect that data. And finally, I want to highlight a project, one individual research project that I'm aware of, just because it's a great example of the collaboration that occurs between institutions in our region. KU's been awarded an EPSCoR Track 2 grant to study aquatic intermittency effects on microbiomes in streams. And they're calling that AIMS for short. And while KU is the awarded institution, this grant is going to involve 18 investigators at 8 institutions across the United States. KU, K-State, and Haskell Indian universities are the Kansas institutions that are participating. But investigators in Oklahoma, Alabama, Mississippi, and Idaho are involved as well. So these are the kinds of collaborations that kind of get me excited and all of us at KanREN, because after all, one of the key drivers for our network and our organization is to enable these sorts of data streams and workflows. We're super excited to be a part of that kind of collaboration. So with that smooth transition to regional cooperation, I'm going to end my presentation here and turn it over to James from Great Plains Network to talk about regional CI highlights.
Thank you, Casey. And I apologize to everybody immediately about delaying any departure to break. Maybe you can mute and try to do it in the background. Hopefully, can you all see my screen? Okay, good deal. So I'll go real fast. Those of you that know me, I probably would fill up my own hour if I could, because there's been so many great stories in Kansas, especially with the impact that they've had across the region. And a lot of it's been due to KanREN being such a great platform and infrastructure to make those opportunities occur. What I wanted to do real quick, I figured a handful of you probably don't know, you hear GPN constantly. I just wanted to highlight just real quick, it's over 24 universities across this region. They've been working together for over 20 years. Glad to see several of the folks I get to work with on the call. You know, it makes the job a pleasure, but it's a great history of great stuff happening. It's all because ultimately the state networks in each of these states make it happen. They're the ones that make the connectivity. You heard Brad talk about those aspects, and I just wanted to get that in there just for those of you, if any of you hadn't heard any background on GPN. That's a little bit about it. It's a consortium run by these organizations and for the success of research cyber infrastructure. I wanted to put this, I wanted to not put any words on my slides for the most part, but what this here just represents something that a few of you probably have seen in the past, but this is a very recent, as in just last night, the past 5 years of grants that have collaborators on the grant, co-PIs, that also partner with somebody outside of Kansas. So these are only grants that either the co-PI or the PI is in Kansas and others are outside. So this is just a snapshot. There's like a 91 entries with all that narrowing down of attributes. This is just the National Science Foundation grants. I realize there's the USDA, NIH, but if you look at this particular graph, there's a lot of interstate collaboration. And many of these may not have a lot of data movement, but you can see here on the right, I narrowed into just the MRIs. These are major research instrumentation grants. And when those are collaborating across state boundaries, they're often taking the output or the input of those instruments and sharing them to other institutions. I zoomed in here just to highlight one of the interesting projects. There were two different Kansas State University researchers involved in two different grants that both received two different MRIs, with the one common person being this person here. Anyway, encourage you to take this link and explore the tool, play around, look at your campuses. You might be surprised how many NSF awards are at some of the universities. But with this, our community, especially with Kansas's help, you know, realized there's a lot of research cyber infrastructure dependence, you know, and by the way, I'm going to point out this last grant that Casey mentioned, the very last one on the slide, it shows 2.9 million. It's actually a $4 million grant. That's all that's been awarded so far. Most of these grants scale it out, but these are all MRIs or RIIs within the EPSCoR program that are all about collaboration and moving data back and forth. And so in looking at these, we realized that there's a lot of opportunity to understand the underlying infrastructure, and KanREN has been key to that. Another process that provides resources beyond Kansas in this model is Exceed. This is kind of a dated map. They haven't provided a newer one showing some of the resources. Like they've got a cluster in Texas that provides 500,000 cores. There's a couple of new clusters being spun up to provide thousands of GPUs. But within Kansas, there's you know, there's a number of service units being used. In fact, Casey mentioned Terrence at Wichita State University, starting, you know, just in the past few months, has started burning up service units on Exceed GPUs and doing some great work there. But as you can see here, there's close to 700,000 compute units that are happening outside of Kansas, dependent upon the network. And so instead of picking on an individual researcher that's showing success, there's a whole group of researchers across many institutions that are leveraging the network to get to these national resources. But because there's so much going across the network and so much new compute capabilities coming together, the region, and especially with Kansas State's help in this case, and KU's been well involved in this as well, a cyber team grant was proposed and awarded. And so this is a resource that KanREN has been involved in, K-State, KU, that is open to anybody within the region that is interested to stand up research computing capabilities or leverage those research computing capabilities like Casey mentioned, whether they want to have access to Beowulf to do some things, and Beocat. So we have a nice logo. So that's a group that you can reach out to. Kyle, who was mentioned, he had a buddy that actually came up with the logo for the team. But it's even though you only see these institutions, the entire region has been very active in this group. And so I encourage you, if you have any questions, reach out, because it's Kansas folks are at the core of this. This is more detail about the Argo project. The gear was ordered. One correction to what Casey said, that over $300,000 of hardware was purchased, but only one piece of that is going to Kansas State. The rest of it is going at least to the, if you can see it on here, the diamond, the little diamond shapes are all getting a box, and we still have several more locations to put these. And the fantastic thing about this is it's creating a way for folks with large scale computing on their campus to offload a lot of high throughput computing to a national resource, which is exciting. We're in the pilot phases with this. And so this is showing K-State's Beocat sharing opportunistically unused CPU cycles to a number of incredible projects all across the US. The great thing is a lot of researchers and educators in our region need high throughput computing. And so this makes it much simpler for a resource that provides, hundreds of millions of core hours per year to be available to all the campuses and for education and for research. Again, if you have any questions about this, please reach out. I mean, Kansas State is leading this effort, but this one is impacting, as you can see here with the yellow diamonds, all the plan sites are very active in almost weekly discussions about the deployments. I wanted to highlight one last thing that both KU, K-State, and institutions across our part of the country, and in fact the US, have been involved in, is this Nautilus compute concept. And so I encourage anybody, even at schools that are on the call, if you've ever heard of Jupyter, which is a notebook to do science and education, learn programming, this cluster here is the most frictionless way to have access to compute resources without entangling those that you have on your campus. So if you want to have a playground to try ideas, this is a fantastic resource. You can see here, this is a little dated. There's over 500 GPUs available to try out AI, ML. And what we're doing is setting up a framework for nodes to be placed and paid for by external grants to get this hardware distributed. And there's a couple of petabytes of data out there, so you shouldn't have any constraints of playing around with some ideas and doing some great learning. Again, the only way this is possible is because the underlying network, there's transparency from end to end about the performance. So you couldn't run a nationwide cluster like this without knowing that the bits are going to get from end to end with low latency. So I know I used up a little bit of your break, but I wanted to remind folks this is something that I'm very passionate about, the CC Star program. It's going to take a small hiatus after this last deadline on October 1st. There is an incredible amount of success. There's been 6 or 7 awards in Kansas since the inception of CC Star. Across the broader region, there's dozens of other awards and regional approaches, and KanREN has a great number of partners to help, especially in that second area. If there's interest in seeking some of these dollars, we've got redacted proposals written, soup to nuts about how to submit these grants. And so if there's interest in standing up some resources on your campus, reach out to KanREN, and they've got a whole team behind them within the region to help make these happen. And with that, I just want to get to the email up there. Stop for questions. I obviously flew through some of this. I think I did the opposite of Brad, which was not make a lick of sense for most of you, hopefully. But it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I'm very passionate about the research cyber infrastructure across this region, and most of it has been greatly enabled by the partnerships in Kansas and KanREN. It's to see the institutions work together and make these great things like Argo occur, and the cyber team have been phenomenal, just great all around. And with that, I find out that I've been on mute the whole time, right?
And hey, the break, I put the break strategically at this point because I thought there might be some more interest in the stuff that James was talking about. So as we head into a break until 2:45, James, if you've got time to hang around for a while, yeah. If anyone's got questions, want to wait till other people turn their video off and go get a drink or whatever, James will hang with us for a bit. Otherwise, we can just talk about Brad and his addiction to Sankey diagrams. I'm going to say that's open to KanREN staff too, but those of us who spend a bunch of time talking here already, give first shot for people who have not. And also a reminder, the polling closes for the vote at 4 p.m. If you've not already been sufficiently nagged by the reminder emails, I just want to make sure everyone's got those links. Please make sure and vote by 4. We've really been through, I think, all of the information that's kind of pertinent for that now. So if you have not voted, anytime you got a second, like in the last 3 minutes of the break here, please do so. And we actually have a tight race going on in the K-12 area. So just went and checked up on what's going on with those. So usually the KanREN director election can be a little bit on the boring side, but we've got some competition in K-12 today. We're a quiet bunch today, not even much going on Slack. It really feels like Friday to me. Several times I had to remind myself, oh, I have to have a normal work day tomorrow.
You're the boss. I think you ought to give everybody the day off for doing such a good job.
Oh, I would love to. Were it only that easy. I think a bunch of us pretty much have stuff all over our calendars already.
Poor planning.
Actually, if you look at our Built for Teams calendar, I actually think quite a few of the technical staff do have the day off tomorrow.
Well, then make sure that they have their Built for Teams up to date by close of business tomorrow, because I need to get salaried payroll run. For all the rest of you, see, that's what we do around here. Hey, just get that up to date by tomorrow. Small staff can be nice. All right, we are at 2:45, so time to begin the next bit. So, you know, most members, I think, hear from the KanREN staff a lot. I don't know how visible our board of directors is. Our board of directors works hard, but within the board, we have several standing committees that meet on a monthly, typically on a monthly basis. And our committees are where a lot of the heavy lifting takes place. I have our 3 regular standing committees called out here in the agenda. But if you guys run a little short on time, Mark knows that he can talk about the executive committee as well. And KanREN staff work with these committees, and this is where a lot of things happen. I know probably it seems a lot of times like, oh, you know, Cort and the staff are out there coming up with things or making these decisions. but there's really very little that we do without input and guidance from our board or our board committees. So I wanted to give a chance for those committee chairs to have a few minutes to talk to everyone about what they do in the committees, what they've been up to, the kind of things they do, and give you, the rest of you, a chance to kind of get to know them and what that process looks like here. I put them on in an order, but it's not necessary. So I'm going to say, who wants to start?
I like the order that you wrote.
And Sandra's video is already on, so I guess you're up first.
Okay, winner. I'm going to share screen here just to pop open a couple slides here. So we'll see if this will, does that do the trick? Everybody see that okay?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, so thanks so much for the time today. I will be brief, but just wanted to give you a little update on the KanREN membership committee members, as well as the scope of what we've been working on this year. And so I love this phrase that I think really summarizes the KanREN membership committee really well, which is the membership committee represents the intersection of KanREN's operation with KanREN's purpose. And so the stars of the show here, our very own Sister D. Got to wave a hand, do a little reaction. Keith Neufeld. Woohoo! Paul Summer. Yay, Paul. Jay Byers. Betsy Draper. And I mean me, but I'm already waving. So, so I've got Matthew Carver here because sadly, but also happily for Betsy, she's actually going to be heading toward retirement. And so we gave her a round of applause at our last membership committee meeting, which we meet on a monthly basis, like Cort said. And so now we're excited to welcome Matthew, also from K-State. So that's very exciting. And I know that Gary's got a lot of passion for some of the things that we've been talking about in membership committee. And so who knows, maybe we'll recruit him too. But I would be remiss if I didn't also add our ex officio and KanREN members, our very own Mark Griffin. Woohoo! A little wave there, our board chair, and Michelle Kaiser, our board chair elect, and then of course Cort and Erica. So this is how we started. Yes, woohoo! Confetti, right? Confetti moments. So this is how we started back in the fall of 2020. And so I start here because we're going to end on a slide. We've added a few folks to this group. Since we began, what started off in October as a visioning session. And so just to give you a little bit of an understanding of, again, our charge. So again, specifically, we're responsible for reviewing and recommending policies that involve KanREN's general relationship with its members, as well as its own membership in other organizations. And so I've got to work with Cort directly on a quilt presentation, and then I got to see him do a lightning round. So I got a little taste of the lightning round thing as a member of the membership committee. So anyway, there's kind of just all these little intersection points like we've talked before, but it really does bring together a lot of what this annual meeting is really all about. And it's really all about where have we been and where are we going? And so that's really that recommending the direction and vision for membership growth and just overall direction set for the organization. And so, and how do we do that? We're on a cycle, like most things in higher ed, right? So we start with that vision piece. And so in October 2020, in particular, we had a really important meeting, and so kind of back in that sort of October 1 timeframe, it was right maybe the week after that, we pulled together, and we started with the question with 3 different questions. And the first question was, what's the most pressing challenge you're facing as an organization? And then the second question was, what role can you see KanREN playing currently or in the future to transition that challenge into a strength? And then lastly, we asked, if you could dream a dream, what is your broadband vision for the state of Kansas? So isn't that so interesting that here we were back in October 2020, where we posed those 3 questions, and look at where we are today with what our keynote and some of the pressing topics. So I'm going to give you a little bit of highlights of what came out of those 3 questions. First was, when you talk about the most pressing challenge, it was confidence in institutions of higher ed and support from the community. So higher ed and IT are experiencing instability. The pipeline and talent pool, we have quite a lot of retirements going on. And are we able to replace folks in the same type of commitment to the organizations and mission that we've seen historically? And then we're struggling with survival at a time when we need to focus building the future. So all those things were really compelling, right? And very much created a sense of urgency for us. So the next question then, of course, was natural then to say, well, what role can KanREN play in turning that challenge into a strength? And very quickly, we realized, because again, here we were in the middle of a pandemic talking about this, that connectivity is what has to happen. And so it really kind of spilled over into if you could dream a dream. And that dream it could be 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, whatever place people were in and could see themselves. So again, what was interesting about some of these early conversations is we had really long time members, and I'll pick on Fort State, for example, Wichita State, right? KU, K-State. These are pillars. Pittsburgh State. You know, I mean, honestly, the true core of our original membership, right? And even JCCC was part of that original group, and then of course we had left and then came back. But the thing that was common amongst them was just the commitment to connectivity and where we were headed. So the things that were new, so we had folks kind of in a bit of a comfort zone, if you will. We don't have any problems because of KanREN. That was a common phrase. And so meanwhile, we had municipals, in particular, the city of Pittsburgh and Ottawa, new to the party, and they were over there, slaying dragons and doing things, and we're so relieved at the services that KanREN was offering. And so that was a very interesting time. And what kind of came out of that conversation as far as the dream was, first off, Melinda Stanley would get hired at the Kansas Broadband Office, and oh wait, that's a great thing. She already was. And then redundancy and resiliency can no longer be achieved at the circuit level. It requires a long-range plan and design, considering today's level of dependency on technology and connectivity to the internet. So those were all sort of words that, again, like I said, inspired us to think bigger. And so today, it's very inspiring to me to see the Cort's message at the very beginning of this conference and just the 30-year history, and that really now we're seeing the architecture of a 30-year plan before us, right? And so, and I loved seeing Brad's before and after slide. Those are the kinds of things that we're starting to see progress already. And don't get me wrong, Brad, I'm sure already had those things in the making, but what we can do now is line them up and communicate it in a way that, again, folks outside of KanREN also need to hear this message. So that brings us to our new members. And so now, in addition to our core membership and ex officio members and KanREN members, now we've got, they're listed in the KanREN section, is Carrie Lauderdale Olson. and she is part of the E2E group, and she's helping, very much with the marketing efforts. And so it's really important that she is part of this committee. And then also the state broadband office members have also joined our committee officially. And so they are coming, we're just grateful for the time and grateful for the growth, and just are excited to see all the progress that's occurred. And again, that has fueled a lot of what we're hearing at this conference. So thank you for the time. That's all I got. Just wanted to give you a little update. So with that, I'll be quiet and pass the baton. Thank you.
Well, I will cheerfully take the baton. I don't have slides prepared, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what the Finance Committee is and how we operate. The Finance Committee's responsibility is not to decide what to do with KanREN finances. The responsibility is to analyze financial situations and present the analysis to the board to make a decision. And wouldn't want anyone to perceive otherwise about that. So I'd like to share, we haven't specifically articulated these before, but in thinking about the Finance Committee work, I captured what I felt are 3 guiding principles to the way we approach our responsibility to analyze KanREN finance. The first one regards subsidization. And that perspective is that KanREN must not have members subsidizing other members or programs subsidizing other programs without clear accounting and informed consent. Historically, there have been many instances when the backbone members said, we have a large expense for the backbone. Here's a small member. They have a small expense, and we can help cover that for now. We have instances in which backbone members have had changes to their expenses, and the other backbone members said, well, we can pitch in and help cover that change in expense for a period of time so that you can scale your increased expense over several years. In each of these cases, we had clear accounting explaining what those expenses were, and we had informed consent from the members who were being charged extra or voluntarily paying extra to cover expenses of other members. And that principle was applied this year when KanREN was reviewing the Zoom rates. Cort mentioned this in yesterday's business meeting, that Zoom has restructured the way they present rates to KanREN, and the way KanREN presents Zoom rates to members had to be restructured accordingly. And the previous calculations had to do with a la carte services, bundling, etc. They had some Zoom subscribers subsidizing other Zoom subscribers. And that arrangement had not specifically been clear to those partaking of Zoom services from KanREN. The new Zoom rate structure for KanREN members is cost plus. There's an overhead to cover KanREN's expense to administer the Zoom consortium program, and that overhead is simply added to the direct cost to KanREN and presented through to the members. A second guiding principle that I feel we express on the Finance Committee is that it is important for KanREN staff to be able to focus their time on the services that the members need rather than on non-beneficial financial analysis. And I want to be clear, financial analysis and understanding KanREN finance, financial planning, direction, all of those things are very important. But in work that the Finance Committee already started before my involvement when Sandra was chairing the committee, KanREN did away with the annual calculations of how much bandwidth backbone members had used or projected to use in the upcoming year, and basing backbone member rates on those amounts. That was extremely time consuming. Not only was it time consuming, it was arguably not fair, because backbone members can have significant changes in bandwidth consumption from year to year due to things like taking dorms off of the KanREN network and outsourcing their networking, adding them on, changing firewall structure, etc. And in work started under Sandra's leadership, KanREN locked in the rates for backbone members throughout the remainder of the current generation backbone. The Finance Committee has recently been working on the rate and fee model for the next generation of backbone, and we considered how should those expenses be allocated. The backbone expense, how should that be divided across the backbone members? This is a presentation that the board has already seen, but we asked ourselves, what's the most fair way to divide those expenses based on the circuit speed, but you may not be consuming all of the circuit, based on the internet speed, but the internet cost is becoming commoditized and is a vanishingly small part of the total expense to operate KanREN. Based on the cost of the circuit to your institution, what felt most fair to the Finance Committee, which we explored in great depth and then presented to the board, who approved it, is for the backbone members, instead of exploring so many of those different variables, base the members' contribution to KanREN on a scale of the benefit received by the institution. Instead of the bandwidth or the circuit speed, look at what KanREN does for that institution as a partner and as a symbiotic partner. And to scale that perceived benefit to the institution, again, like Cort said in the business meeting yesterday, we looked at IPEDS data, Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System. This is a standardized reporting that higher ed institutions do to a central data collection and analysis agency. It is already a familiar model for institutional contracts, site licenses, etc. And after considerable analysis and preparation and conversation, the board agreed to adopt to allocate backbone expenses across the backbone members, scaled by their IPEDS data. And this model allows KanREN to avoid resuming the time-intensive annual calculations that they did before the current rate freeze. We believe that it fairly allocates expenses, backbone expenses, across the backbone members. And we built in scaling for inflation from year to year. When we locked in the rates across the duration of the current generation backbone, KanREN did project that they could continue to operate throughout that generation of backbone without rate increases. But it doesn't look like that will be the case going forward. And we want to cover increasing expenses built into the model. So now we have a model that should last us through the next generation backbone, hopefully even beyond that, laying the groundwork for simpler backbone cost allocation going potentially a long ways into the future. And then the third principle that I captured from Finance Committee sentiments is that KanREN as a ship should not be steered by finance. It should be steered by its members' needs, but it must be steered around financial icebergs. And the financial iceberg that we can see on the horizon, one more thing that Cort mentioned yesterday, is the FUSF expenses, which you can think of as a tax or a fee on certain kinds of circuits that we get, and the need to get out of leasing circuits and get into leasing fiber. And the board and the executive committee have recently been discussing the need to look into this, to get into fiber, and how that possibly interacts with federal funding programs that KanREN members receive, and how we can leverage opportunities in those federal funding programs to make sure that we're steering around that iceberg into open water for the future. So this is the next project that I foresee for the Finance Committee to undertake. Again, not to make a determination on which way to steer the ship, but to give clear, intelligible information to the board to make that decision. I'm open for questions, but that concludes my portion, and we can move on to the next.
I have a message from Tyler. He was joining, but apparently not yet. All right, then I would say, Mark, you're up.
Yeah, I can kill a few minutes here real quick. Just talking about the executive committee. As most of you probably know, the executive committee is made up of our chairs of all our other committees. So that's Sandra and Keith and Tyler. And then ex officio members are Cort and Erica. And so we meet every month. And really the main purpose that I see for the executive committee is that we discuss a lot more of the details of various projects, various problems, issues that concern KanREN. And we try to boil those issues or those problems down into smaller discussion points that we bring to the full board. And on rare occasions, we will actually make decisions and move forward. But at least for the bigger things, we will just try to narrow it down to maybe a few options that can be discussed at the board meetings, and we bring those to those board members. And for example, some of the things that we talk about, and they've been mentioned yesterday and today, and that's like the FUSF increases that have been coming and that we think are going to progress, and how that relates to the Healthcare Connect funds. Those have been kind of the big things that we've talked about, really, at least over the last, I don't know, 6 months or so. Early on in this fiscal year, we discussed some different personnel policies, mostly in how they relate to the COVID pandemic situation. And then early in this calendar year, I can't remember, I think we started talking about it before Christmas, sometime between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then kind of got a resolution after the new year. And that was a sales tax exemption problem that we had with the state, Kansas. And that all got taken care of. But a lot of those kinds of things we discussed in great detail at our executive board or executive committee meetings. And there's other little things that come up as well, but those were kind of the biggies here this last year. So if anybody has any questions about any of that, I'm happy to take those.
And I don't know if Tyler's going to make it. He's kind of in the middle of some stuff, so I can pinch hit for that if that's here. Watch me looking at the committee chairs thing. Is that okay with you guys? See, that's how it works.
Yep.
The last committee is our personnel committee, which is a bit of an odd man out. The personnel committee, probably their biggest charge is to handle my performance evaluation. That's the biggest thing they do, but it's also a committee that reviews, much like the others, that reviews our policies, our HR employment policies, and things regarding personnel. It got real busy at the beginning of the pandemic, I can tell you that we have a lot of stuff to go through there. But also, so for things there, it allows us to kind of keep level set against our membership also, which is important. We are, one of the outcomes of the sales tax issue was that we are considered by the state an extension of our member institutions. So we also tried to make sure that to the extent it makes sense for us, that a lot of our policies and sensibilities in the way we work align with our member institutions. And that's one of the things also the personnel committee looks at with our employment and HR policies. So they don't have a real exciting job there. Anyone that's ever dealt with HR type stuff, they've got kind of the unfun committee work. That's what all these folks do, and I hope that was helpful. Someone give me some Zoom reaction that looks positive if this was helpful to you and you didn't have a lot of understanding about how this board works and what all goes on here. It's second nature to us that work here, but if you're just a member that has not been really involved in it, you probably wouldn't see just how much interaction and involvement there is. That's one of the things that's been important to me for the last few years to try to change, especially from members who are busy all the time and haven't necessarily had a lot of time to look at how we work.
Yeah, as this year's board chair, I will say that the committees, and I've been on various committees for a while now, but I felt like this year's committees were even busier than usual. I know Sandra, she's a go-getter, and she always overachieves. And so they were very busy and did a fantastic job getting some additional people involved with our committee, which is absolutely terrific. And I know Keith and his team put lots of work into the rates and everything this year. I mean, there was a lot of discussion about that, and quite a bit of that was discussed at the board meetings, but that's probably just a small portion of the amount of discussion that took place in their committee and then at our executive board committee. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes that people just don't see.
And with a minute to go here, I'll say it's not really a committee, but again, I said something about this yesterday. I'm going to do it again. I want to thank our board chairs, past and present, right now, while we're talking about all this stuff. Our board chairs and chair-elects, they give up between, well, it's supposed to be a half an hour every week, and there are a few weeks throughout the year that we skip, and sometimes we end up rolling through to 45 minutes or more. But these folks give up time on a weekly basis to catch up with me and stay informed on what's going on at KanREN. Sometimes Mark, Sandra, having done a lot of this lately, and Michelle also, sometimes it's listening to me ramble about the challenges, whatever new avalanche is coming down on top of KanREN, but it also gives me an opportunity to make sure that they're synced up with what's going on, get their input. It's extremely valuable to me. And thank you guys for putting that time in. I say it all the time, but I say it in front of everyone here. You have no idea how valuable that time is to me.
I will say that is one thing I did not know until the last couple of years, is how much Cort relies on the board chairs and all the committee chairs and the board in general for making decisions. Before I got this involved, I thought Cort was making those decisions, himself. And of course, I thought it was brilliant. And now I decided he really doesn't know that much, and he relies on all of us to make those decisions. So
yeah,
Cort does a fantastic job. And one of the good things about him is that he does care what the rest of the board and what the people, the members of KanREN think, and he tries to follow their wishes as closely as he can.
Yeah, I mean, that's important. We aren't what we are without that. That's a core value here. And we are now up into lightning talks. Okay, there are not too many. We've only got a couple signed up. There's one ringer in here, Brad Fleming. Well, actually, there's another ringer in here. It's called Dash Cat, which is KanREN's official test subject for everything we set up, like a form, whatever. Dashcat actually has vacation time accrued and shows up in many locations, but I don't think we're actually going to get a presentation there. Members who have signed up, I'm just going to go through the list. There is still time. You can sign up in the form. If you don't, we have time. I'm just going to start trying to single people out to do it. Brig McCoy signed up first before anyone else. So Brig, talk about whatever you want for a few minutes.
Well, I was just going to ask if anybody had some advice. I'm Brig McCoy from Kansas City, Kansas Public Library. When we shut down for the pandemic last year, one of the first things we did while we were sending staff home to work was get with our preferred vendor and have them add wireless access points to the external portions of the buildings so that members of the public could access the internet from their cars in the parking lots while we weren't open. And then once we actually put the stuff up and checked it out and got it running, the decision was made not to publicize that because management couldn't figure out how to maintain social distancing for folks without staff on site or being involved. And I was going to see if anybody had any ideas on how we could have gotten around that situation, because I sure couldn't think of anything.
I'm not sure that I totally understand your question. I mean, as far as you needed the social distancing for implementing, for installing the equipment?
No, the social distancing for the folks using it, whether folks would be parked next to each other, whether folks would be sitting at the benches that are outside the buildings or sitting on the curb next to the building or wherever, without staff around to encourage social distancing, we couldn't think of a good way to do that.
Oh, right, because the last thing you want is the nightly news that the library is a super spreader event.
Yeah, I guess we didn't think about that or discuss it. We did go ahead and add some outdoor Wi-Fi ourselves for the parking lot and different areas on campus here. But I guess we were under the impression people would police themselves. I'm not sure that's a great solution, but I don't know that we've had any major issues with that either.
I would say JCCC did not think people would police themselves, and we had a very strong signage campaign. And so literally taped off stuff so people they physically couldn't get closer than was recommended. So that's, and I could send you, we did an actual photo story on it. I'd be happy to send you a visual of what I'm talking about.
Sure, that'd be helpful.
Lawrence Public Library chose to communicate that information via the splash screen upon connection to the Wi-Fi network. We relied on some signage as well that was posted in the green space near the building, that which is managed by Parks and Rec, the same signage that they used in all of their park spaces, with basic recommendations on social distancing and hand washing and such, and basically just copied the same language into our splash screen to communicate that to everyone who joined.
Yeah, that was one of the things we ran into, is that the last time we upgraded our wireless controller system, the decision was made not to use a splash screen mechanism because the difficulty different patrons were having getting through the splash screen to the internet. And by not having the splash screen, it just made it easier for folks to connect to an open Wi-Fi port and go down the road, so to speak.
Wow, and here I was giving our library credit for those signs. Now I know it's Parks and Rec that I need to pat on the back for it.
That's right.
See, guys, lightning talks, interesting topics, and interaction like this is fine too.
Yeah, that's really all I had. I was just curious how other folks handled that kind of a situation.
I was gonna be honest, up in our part of the state, we didn't really plan it. So we, our local, one of our local internet providers put in lots of community hotspots around the county. And then several of our schools, we put in some additional outdoor access points in different places. But we honestly didn't have a plan in place of communicating anything about social distancing. We just basically left it up to everybody on their own, but we're a little different situation in our part of the state as like a Lawrence or a Kansas City. A lot less patrons, a lot less people. So a little different situation for us. And we really didn't have problems with people congregating or having any problems with that.
We've had, I was gonna say, we've had situations where one of our branches is next door to a middle school, and they have really, really unfortunate problems with all the kids coming over to the library after school closes. And so that, I think, drove some of the concern management had about helping encourage social distancing.
Know what you're saying, Jared. There are some parts of the state where in order to cause a super spreader event, you would literally have to get half the county together.
Well, it's interesting that Jared had a comment in there because he is our next lightning talk. And before he starts, I will also say he is one of the people running for a K-12 board seat, which also means that I can remind you, if you've not yet completed your ballot and done your voting, please do so. We are down to about a half an hour before polling closes. And Jared, what would you like to talk about?
I didn't have anything specific other than Cort, I know you'd asked me a few weeks ago if I was interested to be nominated as one of the board members, and I never responded back to you. So I was actually not sure if I was nominated or not, but just wanted everybody to see my face. So if you knew who you were voting for, if I get on the board, I'll do my best to support all of us as a community, all of our K-12 schools. I know most of you've already voted, but that's fine. But I just wanted you to see my face, see who I am. If you didn't know from past, just appreciate everything Cort does and all the board members do and all the committee chairs. I know we've definitely been relying on our network a lot this past year with all the distance learning and everything that's been going on. But I just want to say I appreciate the KanREN community and everything that we are and we stand for. Nothing really discussion, just wanted to say that and put that out there. So
well, you're nominated by a current K-12 board member who's outgoing, so there was no way your nomination was not going to be accepted.
But I didn't have a discussion, so that I just wanted to throw that out there. So.
Well, no one else is in the sign-up list, so what comes next is I start picking on people like, oh, Sandra, your basement project.
I was over here digging up, looking for my the photo story that I promised I was going to put that in chat. But yeah, I'll bore you with my basement story real quick. So we are just like most people, you know. We had that project that's, you know, kind of on your last nerve about your house or whatever, that I think we all kind of zeroed in on during COVID. And so the fun part that we had, so we had the thing to know about sort of our household, my husband and I are empty nesters that we thought we were, I should say it that way. COVID hits and we had just gone through a major downsize I kid you not, donated like 5 driveways worth of stuff, because if you have kids, part of what you know is that they accumulate a ton of stuff. And so when they're kind of at the end of that, then it's time to let somebody else, you know, have a go at some of that fun, right? So
Are you
don't
saying you're
downsizing.
throwing all your kids' junk away?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
So we
Making sure I
we
got that right.
accomplish that. We get moved over. I mean, yeah. Well, so kid you not, we get to the infamous. Well, first off, we get to the Super Bowl day, and our son says, "Hey, guess what? I'm going to move back." Oh, fantastic! That's great. So he has he and his girlfriend and their dog, and then. And the arrangements aren't clear at that point, but we're excited. Oh, great. He's coming back to Kansas City. He'd been in Arizona. And then our daughter was doing her study abroad, and she literally is over in the middle of COVID. And so she gets sent home. And so now here we are all living under the same roof in a downsized situation. So we started to really feel the pinch of square footage, and the fact that we were so happy that we've done this downsize. It was like, oh gosh, now we're missing that. So I'll share screen here and just show you the end result, which was getting the ping pong table set up. So there's the first match being played, and so that was very exciting. And now they're just visiting instead of living with us, which is great. And so that was COVID in a nutshell, right? Was kind of having everybody come back, and then they all left and we finished our basement. So there's that. And let's see if I've got any other photos that are important to. Oh, no, not really. Maybe the only this one, that the inspiration, which you can't really tell that from the photo of the ping pong table, is that the Soggy Dollar, if anybody's ever been there, that was kind of our goal, that it would be kind of just a laid back, you know, fun place to play games and stuff like that. So that venue is of course outdoor, and you can do all kinds of just like little fun games and that kind of thing, and meet people from wherever, and it's just a blast, you know. But so that's our basement inspiration. Thank you, COVID.
Yeah, I mean, the big problem I have is finding and affording anything, you know, like for working on the house, man, nothing's even available, it seems like.
As a recent empty nester, let me tell you, Sanda, you're describing a scenario that Mindy and I already have formulated a plan for. The day that both girls move back in with us is the same day that Mindy and I, are going to move back in with my parents.
Oh.
So the girls can just have the house and we'll move back in with my parents.
Oh, I love it.
Because we downsize square footage dramatically also. So there's just not going to be room.
Oh, there wasn't. Exactly. That was part of the fun. Like, oh my gosh. And of course we were just Zooming nonstop. I mean, we all remember it, right? I was like, oh man, it was fun stuff. Whew.
I have browbeat someone else into, yeah, okay, I was bugging him over here. Chris Crook, who's also our corporate treasurer, and see, Chris didn't have to give any kind of financial reports yesterday or today. So I told him that now he's going to have to do some kind of a lightning talk briefly. And I tried to get him to talk about bicycles, and he wouldn't. But he also has a really cool office, his COVID office, that I only know about because I had to have him sign some paperwork a few months ago.
Yes. So you know, KU, everybody's working remote. I've got staff that report to me for like network construction, network operations center that's 24/7. I've got the data center guys. So there's some physical security, and there's you know, some people that are keeping everything running. They're on site. But for the rest of my staff, it really is important for me in leadership to stay away. and not draw people into the office. And it was evident after about 8 months that working from home, I might end up, it was not good. It was unpleasant being at home. I was constantly caught between what was for lunch. My daughter was attending her English class properly. She's in high school, and the battles went on, and I couldn't, I was starting to go crazy. So my wife moved her. She had a gift shop, art gallery downtown that was coming due, and the $4,000 worth of rent per month didn't look like it was something we wanted to pay with nobody actually attending. So she got an office in this little office building at 700 Mass, Jesus Street, which is right across from the Raven bookstore. And I'll give you a little tour here in a second. But then we were walking by this utility closet, and they were cleaning it out. And I joked to the property manager, I said, "How much rent for the utility closet?" And he said, "Oh, I'll give it to you for like $100. And I'm like, I'm in. Like, I mean, I just immediately, like, worth every bit of my sanity. And so it is not pretty. This is not a pretty space, but it's cool.
Yeah, but you've got a view out the window. You've got an awesome view.
So this is cool, right? So there's Mass Street, right? You can kind of see Mass Street, and you can see Liberty Hall. There's Raven Bookstore. So
if KanREN doesn't get a regular office again after all this is over, I'm going to go get the closet next door to Chris's.
So yeah, there's this, and then I mean, this is where it becomes a utility closet, right? I mean, I'm putting on airs like it's got art up, and it's but it's just a utility closet. And for the people that are interested in old tech, there is a comm dial with a comm switch 7500 with a bunch of punch down blocks stuck to the wall. So it's so you got your pod lines.
It's very fitting for an IT person to be in the
telco closet.
Telco closet.
Totally. So anyway, so it saved my sanity, and it's cheaper than 1 hour of therapy. So yeah, that's my little COVID story.
Oh my gosh, if anyone ever asks me the secret to Chris's success, I'm going to say that Mary made him move into the frame room.
Exactly. You should, where I work is not beautiful.
Just not KU's frame room. I don't have to say that.
Right. Anyway, that's my story.
Now this is some pretty cool lightning talk stuff here. So who wants to go next?
Well, Cort, since I can't rival the basement projects, but in retirement, I'm referring to this as my very long summer vacation. So let me quickly show you the plans for the very long summer vacation. Let's see. All right, so I have a 5-step process, but I'll just highlight step 4. So what my spouse and I have done is we bought a fixer-upper, and it happens to be across the street from our oldest daughter and our 3 grandchildren. So we invited the neighbors to help us in the demo. And we have 4 granddaughters and a grandson. So they've all been outfitted with a Draper construction crew helmets and goggles and enthusiasm, as you can see from granddaughter Audrey. We have a lot of painting to do. So one of the things that we did was gave the kids some markers and said, don't tell your mothers, but we have 2 daughters. Don't tell your mothers, but you can draw on any wall in the house, and they did. So it's been a fun demolition project, and now we're just we're waiting for the work crews to come in and start doing the remodeling, And for anybody who's in the pickle of ordering appliances, we have no idea when our kitchen appliances will arrive. No estimated date of arrival. But we decided to make the move because the youngest one, when she was over at the house, my daughter was doing some work for us while we were gone, and the 2-year-old sat down and her mom said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm waiting for Oma and Pops." So this is a good time to retire.
That is awesome. Now, did you have to buy the better kind of kills to go on those walls before you painted them?
You know, we went with watercolor markers, so I just use a sponge mop.
Okay.
But they have helped with some other painting. I use the term help loosely. I did not realize when you have 3 or 4 or 5 grandkids between the ages of 2 and 9 that they can step in paint trays, they can kick over paint buckets, they can throw paint in places you did not know paint could be thrown.
I thought that was the worst too, but does anyone here know what a Maine Coon cat looks like? That tail is like a paint roller, and it will go into the roller paint.
No matter what your grandkids get into, though, those are some great memories for both you and them. That's awesome.
Yeah, now that we're all vaccinated, I was preparing breakfast one morning for the clan, and I cracked an egg. And with that, I heard the pitter patter of a whole bunch of footsteps, and the granddaughters rushed into the kitchen and said, "We want to help." And I said, "Oh, and I thought, this is the test, Oma, whether you can." So I said, "Sure, everybody help." And so most of the eggs got into the bowl, and I didn't spend too long picking eggshell out, and I discovered some new egg cracking techniques that I did not know existed. But again, when you get that kind of help, you learn all sorts of things.
Yep, that's great.
And my daughters are wondering why I was never that fun when they were young.
Yeah, I've heard that from my kids too.
I'm taking notes about all of this.
Our girls are at just the right age. We're at that brutal honesty stage where when they ask a question like that, I just tell them, well, quite frankly, I didn't like you as much.
Oh, we have got plenty of time. Who would like to go next?
The outdoor Wi-Fi question got me thinking about something. Are there any users of Fortinet's Forti AP access points out there who have any thoughts on statistic collection for Fortinet access points?
We're using Aruba's wireless controller and their access points, and they stink when it comes to statistics.
Aaron, hey, this is Heath with KanREN. So what statistics are you looking for?
The state library asks us to collect session counts for users of our wireless networks, and I haven't found a way to collect that kind of information for the Fortinet APs yet. It's kind of a strange thing to report on anyway, because it doesn't seem to deliver a lot of valuable information about actual use of the network, just to say how many sessions with connected devices there have been. So
some degree it could give you a bit of a yeah, I mean, as far as actual usage for maybe what they're looking for, I don't know how useful that information is. It certainly does tell you, how used your network is, but maybe not necessarily how many users you have or how. I mean, you got one guy sitting there banging away on, what BitTorrent or whatever. I know you guys kind of restrict that kind of stuff, but something like that is going to build a ton of sessions. Well, just doesn't really tell you much. What I was going to go with is if you had. I don't know if you had any money to throw at it or anything, but the Forti Analyzer product they have, the Fortinet makes, does collect that information. Or I believe that information is also available via SNMP. So if you have any type of management network monitoring system, those type of things would actually be able to get that information from you as well.
We don't have that right now, but I'll think about those options. Thank you.
Aaron, were you asking number of user sessions or number of like IP sessions?
Number of user sessions is what the state library collects.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, all that stuff should be available via SNMP. So if you had something, on the free side, we use LibreNMS, and it's, I mean, for a very small network, you could probably do a pretty lightweight setup on just a generic white box.
What was that name again?
LibreNMS, that's what
Okay.
KanREN is currently using for network monitoring. It scales up pretty well as well, but I think my initial test, when I was first just evaluating it, I just had it on your basic setup with like 4 gig of RAM and a couple CPUs, and it ran pretty fine for monitoring a handful of devices. I don't know how big your network is. And it's a Linux-based product, so you'd have to, if you were familiar with Linux. But otherwise, it's pretty easy to set up as well. One of the reasons why I leaned it towards it in evaluation. But there's other ones. Obviously, there's SolarWinds, Orion, stuff that you're going to pay for, PRTG, those things. And I'm quite familiar with the Fortinet products as well. So I do know that, yeah, all that information is available via SNMP collection, including, number of users on the access points, how, as far as like firewall goes, that's your session counts and that kind of stuff would all be accessible via SNMP. And then with your tool, whatever network monitoring tool you go with, should be able to, in theory, pull that information down.
Thank you. I'll look into that. We've been quite happy with the Fortinet products, and we're just our outdoor Wi-Fi access points that we added were Forta APs, so that was my first experience with those. We're about to replace our indoor Meraki access points with more Forta APs, so we'll be all Fortinet at that point.
Cool. I don't know. You're the first person I've heard who's used their wireless product, so I'm glad to hear it's working well for you. I've always been kind of curious because who is the other one who does wireless? Is it Cradle Point? I hear they're okay, but a little iffy on the features.
And Aaron, if it would help, we can also grab just flow count out of Kintech if you have specific public IPs that those users would map to. Pretty quick and easy. We could have that dump out to you every day, every week, every month type of interval, whatever would work best for you. So might be able to give you what you're looking for, maybe, without having to spend extra money. Just let us know.
That's great.
I think we're going to take just a couple of minutes here. Obviously, continued chatter is welcome.
Jared Pickerel, how old are these troublemakers that we're seeing pictures of that you're scrolling?
Sorry, I just couldn't help myself.
Yeah.
just they're not mine, but the closest I've got, they're my nephews. So they're 16 months now. So they've made life interesting and fun the last year and a half. So.
Having been an uncle first and then having my own kids, I can say it's a heck of a lot more fun being an uncle.
Yes, because they can stay home with mom and dad.
You can fill them full of sugar, shake them up, and then give them back to your sibling.
Yep.
I waited for my siblings to brave that before I did too.
Yeah, I made the mistake of doing that with my brother's kids, and now he's paying me back. That whole filling full of sugar thing. All right, we are up for pretty much the last regular session. After this, we just do a little wrap up, and the votes, we have definitely thinned out to a pretty small crowd here. So we are probably going to be breaking a bit early today. I don't think we'll need the full 15 minutes at the end. Last session I had planned was a vision casting session that Mark and I were going to lead. I will be honest, we have a fairly small group here. I was really hoping for a little bit more attendance at this point, so I don't know how much we have to do. If we don't make it very far and we don't have too many ideas amongst us, I do have, let's see, show me on the reactions, give me a thumbs up, smiley face, whatever you like for anyone who was not present at the business meeting yesterday. Member, non-member alike.
Suggestion, I would say thumbs up is best because the others disappear after about 3 seconds.
Not too many. Well, I did quickly pare down some of the stuff from the business meeting presentation about some of the future of KanREN and stuff that we're looking at going forward that was general public acceptable if we wanted to go there, but it didn't look like there's a lot of folks who didn't see that. So this last session is kind of about where we go with the consortium. Where do you want to see it go? What do we need to do? What kind of goals and vision should we have? And I'll kick it off with a little bit about what's going on. I got to say, I got an excellent setup for this that I was not planning on, but I'll take it from the committee chairs discussion. An example of how we move forward methodically, definitely. Keith presented from Finance Committee on the work we did with our backbone members, and the one thing that he didn't say in there about all that is it's very difficult. It was getting increasingly difficult to try to determine what consumption is. If one backbone member has a 100 gig port and another one wants to use 5-10 gig ports instead, how do you count that? And as Brad showed earlier on some of the traffic graphs, especially with our largest members that have research engagement stuff going on, those, when you use a traffic measurement that looks kind of like an industry standard thing that's based on big I internet, mostly content consumption, those are real deterministic. You see a real steady envelope in the traffic movement. It draws a really pretty 95th percentile line. But when you start factoring in some of those odd traffic bursts that come from research institutions, what's that 95th percentile line really tell you? And is it even accurate anymore? So, over the past few years, we've worked through a really great solution to that issue. And ultimately, I can't tell you how much I'd love to have the entire consortium operating in a manner that's not about consumption or not about what your port speed is, but it's about a fair and equitable share of KanREN's expenses and focus on your real missions, which, I mean, granted, people here are by and large IT people, but that's not what the mission of your institution is. And that's where I'd really like to see people be able to be more focused. And the last thing I ever, if I could change the world tomorrow, the last thing I would ever hear from a KanREN member is, do I have enough money for enough bits per second? We really need to transcend that as fast as we can and do everything we can to get beyond that. That is not the conversation that we should be having in 2021. And I jump over to the work Sandra's done on the membership committee, that we've included some outside stakeholders. We've had a lot of conversations with the state broadband office, and I think that was pretty apparent in Stanley's presentation yesterday. I mean, I was surprised we ended up on a slide. I hope we stay on that slide, and all of that remains and grows. But a year ago, we would have never, our name would have never shown up in any of that stuff. So this is kind of the direction we're going. We're definitely trying to work towards fiber everywhere we can. I wish I could tell you it was possible for KanREN to simultaneously work on a fiber acquisition everywhere, but we can't do everywhere at once. We do have to come at this somewhat methodically. I will tell those of you who are here now, when you hear me talk a lot about backbone and focus on the universities and JCCC, that's our backbone members. It is absolutely never a case that I don't care about or I'm forgetting about anyone else, but there's also politics at play here. The telco industry, okay, yeah, we're all good here, we're all friends. The telco industry, they ignore us when we're working with the big guys, because they know there are so many things interwoven, like Keith said, with a symbiotic relationship, because they know that we're so interwoven with them, and those telecoms have not really had a lot of business there. They kind of leave us alone when we're doing stuff there. So we focus on deploying this fiber backbone. We talk about the backbone, we talk about the big institutions, we get that fiber deployed. We're also sneaking something by with a path of least resistance to build that foundation that the organization needs to build on. You know, we start with the foundation, then we start building up more and more pieces, and pretty soon we have Betsy's walls with marker all over them. Seriously though, start with the foundation, then we start building up, then we start including more institutions. We look at more ways to deploy infrastructure. We need to get out from under universal service. I mean, just about everyone here, if not everyone, is either a recipient and or pays into universal service fund. Contribution factor at 31.8%. Not only am I scared about that, what that means for KanREN's future and how much money we're hemorrhaging paying those FUSF fees, but that also tells me that there's a program out there that's unsustainable. So if you are a recipient of those funds, E-Rate or Healthcare Connect Fund, you know, buy what you can now. If there is a place where a long-term fiber lease makes sense for you, use that program and acquire it now, because I don't see how that program is going to sustain itself. But if you can leverage those programs to buy, which they will do, they will pay for you to build fiber. They will pay for a long-term fiber lease. And, you know, say you do, and I just reviewed this in Healthcare Connect, say you do a 20-year fiber lease, they will pay for that over 3 years. In the last 17 are yours. That program can go away. You've still got the asset. I think that's something critical that everyone needs to be looking at, because seriously, at a contribution factor of 31.8% and rising, that program's going to implode. There's no way. So I have just rambled for a while, kind of about where I see KanREN going right now. Some of the stuff that we're doing right now that's already in the hopper. But I also don't want to stop there. I want to have a conversation with the consortium about, you know, I say we can't do everything at once, but we need to start lining up, you know, and it's not once that fiber is built. I mean, the goal, the moment that is secured, and we know that backbone piece is going to happen, I want to be ready to start moving in the initial phases of what comes next. And I want to know what's important to the membership. I want to know what we need to do. We're coming up on 30 years as an organization. I want to know what we're going to do for the next 10, 20, and out to another 30. Getting kind of quiet. Somebody jump in here.
I was going to say, I'd like to see more public libraries be involved, but right now you've only got 6, so I don't know what leverage to pull with them to encourage them to join as members and get connectivity.
You know, libraries, because so many of our public libraries are very small. I mean,
yes,
as KanREN members go, the public libraries, yeah, you guys are huge, both of you, gigantic by comparison. Back in the CanEd days, you know, we worked with libraries that was, you know, 2 people who volunteered working in a trailer 2 afternoons a week.
Yeah.
One of the problems that we are going to face with libraries that size is KanREN doesn't scale down to them very well. Not without some kind of a subsidy or something else in place. We don't scale down quite. I would love to scale down better, but if that library's got to pull full freight on it, we don't scale down that well. We are working. We're trying to work on some solutions that kind of marry KanREN service, KanREN support with more traditional business class internet connections to see if we can add value and still keep the price point in line to do something for smaller members. That's definitely out there. But another thing before we get that small, and I'm going to kind of canvas you guys here, and yes, the thumbs up, it lasts longer. I'm interested, how many people here learn something? How many people here learn something about all of the things that KanREN provides with all of its connectivity over the last couple of days that maybe you didn't know? I mean, the security features that we've got thrown in there, especially with the DDoS mitigation. You know, I realize not everyone can afford that stuff, but that is one of the things we do to try to bring more value, is to try to see how many things that we can push into there. And we're the challenge, because for anyone here who files E-rate, who has to work on an E-rate filing, what happens the second we give you a separate line item with a dollar value on it that has to do with something that's security? That's a service.
It gets kicked out, doesn't it?
You're not getting it funded. But when we sell you broadband internet that just happens to have 3 times the monthly value of just a DIA connection worth of extra security stuff thrown in on top, and that's just what our base internet is, what happens with that filing? We don't have a calculation to cost allocate that out. It's just the way our service works. Our broadband internet connectivity is secure connectivity. But then the problem we have is, if we're going to do that, Jared, get in the conversation here, man, speak up. Don't shove it all in chat. But if we're going to do that, then we need members out there kind of pushing that stuff around and helping us get the word out. Because I'll tell you, when we're approaching any member that doesn't know who and what we are, and I've been doing this for 22 years now, we look an awful lot like just some ISP blindly hitting them up looking for business. We need strategies for dealing with that.
Yeah, and the biggest problem that I have here is that we're lucky enough to have gotten Google Fiber. So the odds of us becoming a connected member down the road aren't real high. But the stuff you do for members in terms of consulting and other services like providing Zoom is well worth membership costs.
And never say never on that connectivity. We may reach a point where we've got enough stuff bundled in that you need that it makes sense to pay more for connectivity just for that stuff. I'm always hopeful.
We had a conversation about 6 months before the pandemic, where we were told the free service from Google Fiber was time limited. And I called Google Fiber and asked them to confirm for me what that time limit was, what the date was. And they said, well, as long as you're a nonprofit, don't worry about it. And so I haven't seen anything with enough leverage to get me to move on from Google Fiber here. We've got it for 4 of our 5 branches, the other branches outside their service area. And I can see us moving the other branch to you guys, but the 4 big ones, well, the 4 others I don't see.
So since we had the broadband office here yesterday, another thing that I'll bring up throughout here for discussion, You know, in the vast majority of states in the United States, you realize the state government's paying for some of this stuff. It may not be completely free, but it's at least subsidized, and there's a lot of money that comes into it ongoing. That's something we've never had here in Kansas. That's something that I see potentially changing with, I mean, I realize the federal money coming in now is one time, but also think about what happens as we continue to raise awareness. I mean, what we're trying to do with anchor institutions is now, I mean, the broadband office, even 6 months ago, did not recognize that there was anything other than, you know, 25.3, they're slipping that up to 100 down now, but that base level of rural connectivity, that's great. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. That is definitely a need our state has. But as we continue to gain more exposure to the institutional needs of anchor institutions, it's very probable that somewhere down the line in the future, our state could get involved. So what would be good or what would be bad about that? There's usually strength.
What would that look like?
Well, let's see. A fairly common model where the R&E network actually partners with the state is, if you use the R&E network, then the state government subsidizes a great or most of the cost. And if you choose not to be with that R&E network, they don't. I realize that's kind of dreaming here, but I'm not kidding. That's a lot of states. One of the things that, you know, one of the downsides about that also, though, is then you don't have as much choice in what you do, because when you start working at that level, then we're talking about some fairly large RFP processes that can become a little bit monolithic working with telcos. You know, where we're still dealing with access circuits, it probably turns into something like a statewide RFP and a limited number of carriers involved. Or, you know, you also open the door, the state might come along and say something like, yes, we'll subsidize this for you, but we want you to do this thing and this thing and this other thing. Yeah, everyone who's taking E-rate money and you have to have content filtering, the state starts putting in money, they can put their own requirements on top as well.
Cort, I just want to take a little bit of a departure that as we're talking about the broadband stuff. So I wasn't involved. I mean, it was a long time ago in the North Dakota effort to get internet out to the county seats, and no telcos would look at us. So it was a state government and higher ed effort to get going on that. But, you know, one of the things that was key in that effort was getting out to the communities, and the public libraries are key partners in that awareness and getting rallying the support for making things happen. I mean, you know, I also took my dog and pony show to a couple of small town cafes and had pie and coffee too. But I mean, we were just out there knocking on the doors, and the public libraries, even the smallest ones, were just critical points of success to be able to develop that awareness and a sense of trying to build up some demand to make some change.
You know, when we've seen some momentum here, of course, you know, it's always, there's no money to back it, so how far it goes is limited. But yeah, and our public libraries are focal points for those in communities with the most amount of need. Yeah, libraries are important.
I haven't looked at the library membership list recently. I know there's a handful, right? Are we? Do we include any of the regional systems?
Well, if they wanted to, Neckles has been a member in the past, right. And in fact, wow, in ancient history, we actually ran. We had almost all of the Neckles libraries connected, but technology changes, technology changes and changing price points for service. And what ended up happening was, small business service or residential on steroids started matching a price point and a need level that was maybe not a great fit, but it was better for what they were doing. And one by one, they sort of drifted off.
I think in terms of like some of the support services and the kind of the quality of the knowledge base that you all represent, that seems like it's a valuable resource for those regional systems. I would think that it would be enough to convince them to become member institutions, though not probably connected member institutions in many cases. But
yeah, so here's a reality. Here's the reality, folks. I was thinking about this actually from a discussion just yesterday about non-connected and what we do non-connected. Connectivity is our 900-pound gorilla. And one of the things that I've tracked, if you've been in business meetings for a few years, is me watching the connected versus non-connected. Because really the technical staff we have that provide that, those people are paid for with connectivity. And that's where the salaries come from. So as our non-connected membership increases, if there's an expectation to provide those support services, I mean, bottom line, what I'm trying to get to is at $504 a year, we can't pay for Brad and his team. And then the other thing is, well, we know that there's a lot of companies out there offering outsourcing. And I think the polite comment was they've got really good salespeople, but when it comes to actually doing the work after, well, the problem that we would have is if we are going to charge something in the ballpark of what they're charging, our support would probably be about as good as theirs. Because what they do is they don't, a lot of these organizations, they're not rolling people out from a central location. They're either contract hiring, 1099ing local people without a feel for whether or not they really have the skill set to do the job, or even worse. And dang it, I wish he was still here. We have someone in our community now that used to work for one of the largest K-12 targeting outsourcers in the state. And I know what his story working for them is and why he left, because they simply just oversold and oversold and oversold. And while he was good at doing what he did, there was not enough of him to go around at all. So I'm a little afraid, not afraid enough to not do it, but as a community, we need to look at this. And if that is important, we need to come up with a community model to try to fund that and make sure that we have the expertise we need. And that's fairly cost allocated. Again, Keith, Finance Committee, Sandra, Membership Committee, is this a direction we move in? And whether or not we can do it in a way that is actually recovering costs here. Now, the one beautiful thing about KanREN is we don't really have to make a profit. We don't have a shareholder to pay. But I think there is so much disparity. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say my concern is there is so much disparity between what a lot of those outfits sell and don't provide and what it takes resource-wise to really do the job right, that gap is bigger than their profit margin. So we're kind of walking down that hill. We have the enterprise network operations support that we piloted with Kansas State Schools for the Blind and Deaf last year. And I'm not going to tell you it was perfect. We tripped over ourselves on that, but fortunately we had a longtime KanREN member in those schools willing to work with us and sort of find our legs doing that. But yeah, we definitely have a service. And by the way, for those, since we haven't talked about that a lot, what we settled on was essentially an annual non-refundable retainer. And the way it really worked out is you're paying for a block of time. By prepaying for it, we put a discount on it, so it's less than the normal hourly rate. So we recognize there's some value in us getting paid the money up front, and it's a use or lose. So if you need it, we're there. You got a discount. If you don't, and John Martello at those schools that I worked with on setting this up said his view of it was more of an insurance policy. They weren't looking at it as all day, every day, depend on KanREN, but we were the insurance policy. When they ran shorthanded, when something bad happened, And what that is, we do that today. We say time and workload permitting, which might mean someone has a need and we say, yeah, we can bill you. Someone's going to approve hourly billing right now for this. And oh yeah, we're busy because a bunch of other stuff's going on. We also prioritize that, and we would put those requests into our queue the same way as we do anything else, so that there was a better expectation of service level from us. Now I've just described that service that's kind of slowly inching forward. Does that sound like a good one?
What type of service were you providing to Kansas School for Blind?
So their side of the DMARC, there's a good telco sounding term for you. Anything within our competency. I mean, we'll try to help pretty much with anything on their side we can. On-site isn't really our forte because it's difficult. I mean, you start eating up huge amount of resources if we have to travel very far. So most of it is kind of based on trying to be able to work remotely with someone on site doing eyes and hands. But really, there's not a lot of limitation to it. It's what do you need us to do? Understanding that we're not going to be experts in every brand of equipment or every make, model. And it's awesome that there are members of our tech team here right now, because they'll keep me honest when I mess this up. I'm really looking at Heath. He's one of the people that has to make good on the promises I make with this stuff. But really, it's, I mean, the idea of what we've heard time and time again when we've jumped in and tried to help people out is that there's value there. I think our folks are great, and our tech team, even if it's not equipment that they're used to, we're pretty good at being multilingual, and we're pretty good at figuring out stuff fast. And most of these guys have enterprise LAN histories. We may be a wide area shop now, but we poached most of our technical staff from enterprise LAN environments.
Hey, Cort. Cort, I have a different question here. Did I hear you correctly say that KanREN now has lobby representation in the Capitol, at the Capitol?
We do. KanREN
Okay.
has a lobbyist.
Okay. I feel in my history in association with KanREN, felt like that's been missing for years. It's, going out to the communities is great, but also you got all this representation coming into one location in the Capitol, and that legislative body represents all corners of the state, and it would be interesting to hear how that, if you see progress, or if you see that helping to have someone carrying a KanREN badge around the state capitol, so to speak, because I've seen so many things, so many initiatives come out of that body and go, well, we've already got that here. That's KanREN. Well, you remember the CanEd days.
Yep.
It was like, to me, that made absolutely no sense. Why that got funding, why that got traction, why that took off, and then it took 10 years for somebody to finally say, oh, well, that was silly, but we spent a bunch of money on it.
I think Gary Pratt from K-State put it best yesterday when he got into that kind of direct interaction with Stanley Adams about the community needing to be involved, frequent, and upfront at the beginning of the process and frequently through it. And the thing that I really latched onto is that he said, and not just give comments after the decision's made, because that's oftentimes what happens to us. So two things happened to change the thing about the lobbyist. Number one, I had been under a mistaken impression that nonprofit 501c3s cannot do that. Turns out we are not under any such restraint. I mean, there is a restraint about what percentage of our revenue we can spend on it, which in the composition of KanREN would be ridiculous if we spent that much money on lobby. So we're clear there, and we cannot endorse any candidate for election. We cannot do that. But as far as other, all the other stuff in the lobby area, we can do it. And more importantly, I've also realized that those people are there all day, every day. That's what they are there to do. And it's not just the relationships that they have with lawmakers and staff members, it's also the relationships they have with each other. Because I already know from our lobbyist who's only been working for us a few weeks, that, you know, when he shows up in a meeting or he shows up to talk about something, the other lobbyists want to know, well, who are you here representing? And we're also sending a message. And the message that we're sending is that KanREN's here, we're here to stay, and we're going to play in the game at that level now. I really look forward to being able to come here next year and tell you that was a great success. We got really lucky. The lobbyist representing us has a great deal of experience in utilities and also represents Pittsburgh State. It was I could not find someone that really had a specialty in this kind of telecom, broadbandy kind of stuff, because you know what? Every one of them with it is sewn up by the telecom industry. And when I discovered that right there, that was just one more reason why I knew this was the right move for us to make.
Is it okay to share who our lobbyist is, or is that something more private?
Oh, no, it's not. His name's Riley Scott, and he's a one-man outfit over there. A lot of them are. He has a distinguished history working on staff for a bunch of key government figures. And he also is representing us with our federal senators and Congress people from Kansas, which is great. So we kind of got double duty there. And so far, he seems to understand us really well. Now, nobody cringed too much. His father is Mike Scott, retired president of AT&T Kansas. And that was kind of the other piece there, was he kind of knew how to speak our language because of his dad. So we got a really good score with him. I've met with him a few times. I think we're going to see good things coming from that. And why that is important is, even though we were on Stanley's slide, things can change very fastly once lawmakers get involved. So we've got someone over there ready to run interference for us at a moment's notice. I mean, something starts brewing up tomorrow. Well, it won't be tomorrow morning, but something starts brewing up, you know, in the morning, he will be on it and taking care of it as soon as it starts. We are actually rolled over the vision casting. That wasn't quite the session I was hoping for, but I think it was quite valuable. I hope you guys got something out of it too. No one answered my question about the enterprise network operations support, though, or whether or not you thought that was valuable. Especially you, Aaron, you brought it up.
I definitely think it's valuable. I mean, I think there's a way to sell that to smaller organizations. I think there's probably a way to get people interested in just being members of the organization, knowing that it's in the interest of broadband development across the state to be members, that our strength as an organization grows from that membership, and that they there may be a proposition that appeals to them on that basis, in conjunction with the idea that they could get some advice, but without promising too much.
Yeah, I mean, we do. And, you know, we as members of the Quilt has a full-time lobbyist in Washington, D.C. And part of what the 38 Quilt members pay into the Quilt goes to pay for that guy. All right, so I promised you guys we'd probably get out of here a little bit early. So we're kind of down to the wrap up. Unless anybody has another burning issue, I am going to jump over to SurveyMonkey here and find out what our election results are. What do you want to do first, rates and budget or directors? Oh, I heard someone say rates and budget. Let's do that. We have 37 votes to accept, 1 vote not to accept, and 2 abstentions. As our bylaws constitute a quorum by the number of votes cast, and the percentage required to pass is based on a percentage of the votes cast and not by the number necessarily present. We have FY22 rates and budget approved by the membership. director elections. Ooh, Jared's still here too. I got to ask before I go into this, Leslie, when you heard about this, did you twist his arm at all?
We didn't even talk about it. That was, I was going to talk with her about it and say, hey, I think maybe I should pull my name out. And we didn't have that discussion.
Well, I didn't know it till I saw it. So yeah.
So Jared and Leslie worked close together, and Leslie was on our board for a number of years, actually served as a board chair. So given that they're close to each other, I kind of wondered for years, you know, why we didn't see Jared's name popped up, and kind of hoped she twisted his arm. Community colleges. Total of 36 votes cast, 34 for Michelle Kaiser, 2 abstentions. K-12 schools, the only one that has any suspense really with it. 36 votes cast, 19 for Jared Pickerel, 12 for Joe Sample, 5 abstentions. Welcome to the board of directors, Jared. Our committee chairs who may still be on the call will be hounding you for committee participation momentarily.
I'm a little scared.
Private colleges and universities, we have 36 votes cast, 35 for Matt Lindsay, and 1 write-in candidate, which I'm going to come back to drill down in and find out what that is. And at large, 36 votes cast, 35 for Tyler Palmer, and 1 abstention.
The write-in candidate, Cort, was an abstain. It looks like that wasn't an option on that particular vote.
Interesting. Okay, so we have a slate of directors for FY22. I'm going to take a breath. And I'm going to say thank you all for attending the KanREN annual meeting. We probably, while we haven't gotten this far yet, we'll probably be doing some kind of a survey. Yes, I know, another survey. Promise it will be brief, but to find out if this format worked and what folks felt about expanding the format back out a little bit. And before I close this down to head out, one last chance. Does anyone have any business to bring? Thank you all for attending very much. This is very meaningful to all of us that work here all day, every day throughout the year. The annual meeting is a time that we get to see a bunch of you in one place at the same time, even if it is just Zoom. I'll hang around for a while. If anyone wants to meet up, exchange information, pass a link about some information back and forth, I'll be here until everyone's ready to go.